Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So some of you may remember all those many years ago when I first started my YouTube channel, I made a video on Michael and Debbie Pearl's book To Train Up a Child. It was one of my first videos that got really popular, and it was an absolutely horrific book. I mean, it still is. They're coming out with a 30th anniversary edition really soon, which is something none of us asked for. But basically the original was essentially a guide to child abuse, which said that in order to train your children, not raise them, but train them, you have to beat them with various kinds of sticks, pull their hair, basically use violence to condition them into doing whatever you want without question. It was horrifying. This book was also linked to the deaths of 7 children, so this wasn't just hypothetically bad, it was really bad. Since I made that video maybe 6 or 7 years ago, something like that, I've revisited the Pearls and their ministry No Greater Joy a couple of times, like when I reviewed some of their other parenting advice, if you can call it that. I reviewed Debi's attempt at a novel which was just racist, Islamophobic, homophobic, poorly written. It was a self-insert nightmare by her. And I also started to review a few of Debi's and Michael, I think's, marriage and relationship advice books, like Created to Be His Helpmeet, Created to Need a Helpmeet, all that absolute nonsense. I don't think I maybe went into too much detail with them, but it's okay because we're going to be covering a little bit of them today and the To Train Up a Child book again. But mostly we're kind of asking, where are Michael and Debi now, and what is that noise? There's a road sweeper outside. Okay, I'm just gonna let it do its thing. I'm not entirely sure where we were. But basically, I've recently found out that Michael and Debi have absolutely not just gone away and, hidden in shame. Instead, they're still running their absolutely horrifying ministry, No Greater Joy. But this time they brought on board their children and grandchildren. So it's a real family affair. It's growing, it's getting bigger. And that is really concerning. Because this isn't just a little bit of hate anymore. This is generational hate. So we're going to be looking back at a little bit of their old content today, but mostly focusing on some of their newer stuff, their social media posts, their current website and magazine, their YouTube videos, because they have a couple of YouTube channels that they run. And we're going to try and combat some of the harm and misinformation that they're spreading and try and put a little bit of good back into the world if we can. Let's see. Also, a little bit of shameless promotion before we start. I want to extend a little thank you to Ted from the band Mind's Idol. They're a really small little UK band, but they're really fun, and they're currently one of my favourites, and I just love their music to bits. Ted on stage is kind of like a young, sexy, modern-day Jarvis Cocker. It's great. They're a lot of fun to see live, a lot of fun in their music, and Ted was lovely enough to give me this last time I saw them, and I dragged Elise along with me as well, so she knows them now too. But yeah, just wanted to give a little thank you there in this video and just kind of promote a smaller band because, I think it's good to support independent artists. Anyway, right, let's get into today's video. So, who are the Pearls? If you've not been here before, if you've not seen my other videos on them, I do have a playlist, I think, but let's have a little recap. So No Greater Joy Ministries is run primarily by Michael and Debi Pearl, who are a couple now in their 70s. There's actually a little Meet the Pearls page on their ministry's website, so let's take a look at that. For Michael and Debi, it says they were both raised in Memphis, Tennessee, in good homes, by parents who were faithful to point them to God. Mike is a graduate of Mid-South Bible College in Memphis and has been active in evangelism and the work of the ministry since he was a teenager. This little bio here talks about how him and Debi also ministered to many military families in Memphis, I can't speak, and pastored churches. What they don't discuss here is the fact that Debi was a teenager at the time and Michael was a full-grown man in his mid-20s. Very creepy. We'll talk about that in a second, don't worry. Blah blah blah, they moved to rural Tennessee, God eventually led them into the ministry of writing on child training and family relationships, which has hurt a lot of people, which they now feel is their life's work and calling. In addition to the child training ministry, the work of the prison ministry, missions, Bible studies, and family life is ongoing. Poorly written, but yeah. The Pearls have been married since 1971 and have 5 children and 25 grandchildren and counting. That sounds horrific. The Pearl children have always been involved in their parents' ministry and in their adulthood continue to be involved in some way in ministering where they are. So we do get some information there, but it sadly doesn't really tell the whole story. Instead, I have a few stories to share with you in Michael and Debi's own words about what their marriage and relationship has actually been like over the years. First, you might be wondering, how did Michael and Debi meet? Because I mentioned there, she was a teenager, he was an adult, grooming. Yes, literally that. Debbie tells us this in her book, Preparing to be a Helpmeet. She says, I had just turned 13 when I saw him and knew, just simply knew, he was my man. Man being the operative word because he was a grown adult. If he'd glanced over and been able to read my mind, he would have surely laughed. I almost laughed. It was preposterous to think that I, a scrawny little kid who'd not even gone through puberty, would claim him. The whole community had been talking about the famous young preacher who'd been invited to speak at First Baptist Church's teen retreat. He was all man, plain and simple. At least 6'4" and a dark jaw shadow where he shaved away his beard. My young mind quickly assessed him. He seemed bigger than life. A super in charge type man. And he was old. Very old. And way too big. Outweighing me by over 100 pounds. I guessed that he must have been at least 21 years old. As far as I was concerned, he might as well have been 99. Anybody over 15 seemed ancient to me because they were, compared to you little tiny 13-year-old child. It's very normal for teenagers to have crushes on older men like this, but the fact that he reciprocated and married her at the end of this when it became legal is horrifying, right? This can't just be me who's concerned by this. Finally, Michael began to preach. I don't remember if it happened at the beginning of his message or in the middle or maybe even towards the end, but sometime while he was preaching the gospel, God spoke to me. He's the one you will marry. Whoa, I thought. I don't even need to wear a bra yet. And God is telling me now who I will marry. I clearly remember thinking, this is just too weird. He's too old and I'm just a little kid. But God's ways are not our ways. I'm sure glad about that. So God's also a groomer. Got it. Great. Really spreading a positive message for Christianity here. I know, I'm an atheist. I make a lot of atheist content. I just feel like I should probably step in here and say not all Christians are this creepy, right? It's okay. The spring I turned 16, I finally went through puberty. About time. That summer, I signed on to be a counselor and lifeguard at the Child Evangelism Fellowship Bible Camp. Guess who was there? You got it. My future husband, Mr. King in Charge, famous preacher man himself. He was a special speaker all week, so I had plenty of time to check him out. I'm just actually going to pause here to say, isn't it creepy how he was working specifically with children and teenagers so much, and this is how he found his wife? No. Don't like this man. All the time I was checking him out, he was checking out one of the other girls at the camp. The other girls at the camp who were also literally teenagers and children. This is creepy as hell, and he's 24 by this point. Put him in prison. I didn't really care as I had no emotional attachment to him. While I was there at the camp, one of the older women who was head counselor came to me and said she thought God had spoken to her about something. She was a sober woman, a Baptist. Again, Baptists do not put words in God's mouth. Yet she said, I think God wants you to know that Michael Pearl will someday be your husband. It was embarrassing for one of my mum's friends to tell me something like that. I went home and told my mum, but her friend had already called and informed her. Without a trace of emotion, Mum reminded me to pray for the preacher. She told me he will need a lot of prayer because he is in the ministry. You need to pray for him all the time. What is wrong with these adults? She needed people to protect her, not encourage the grooming. Oh, could be snoring on the floor. Mike needed a ministry for military where he needed a flunky, someone to carry out plans. We became running buddies. And they say romance is dead. Michael usually had a girlfriend with him for these events. Sometimes I had a boyfriend. It was truly strange. His girlfriend would sit between us, so we would have to lean forward to talk to me about the meetings or strategy or whatever we had going. There, right between us, sat his date with nothing to contribute. Sometimes we would pray together with some girl sitting there as if she were a non-being. I was his helper. I'm sorry, but is it not a red flag to anyone else when people call other people non-beings and NPCs and... Oh, no, I don't like it. It's so dehumanizing. Let's not talk about people like that, please. Blah, blah. I was his helper. He needed me. I jumped into any project he had going, not because I was after him, but because I was interested in the things he was interested in. We shared God's vision for winning the lost. Once, one of the young ladies came to me and asked me, since I was such a close friend to Michael, if I would tell him that she was sure she was the one for him. I remember looking her in the eye and saying, "You'll have to grow your hair out first." He would never marry a woman with short hair. I didn't make up the short hair idea just to make her bug off. That's a weird phrase. I knew he was really opinionated about long hair. Most young guys are. Oh god, this is another trend we see with Debbie throughout her entire life and all the content she makes. She's so judgmental of other women and their appearances. She's always calling people ugly or like mocking things like their appearance, their teeth, their hair, their clothes. It's not nice. I don't like it at all. If you watch my review of her novel, and that's something we're not actually going to cover in this video, but I think I did mention one bit later where she referred to some random character in the book that she'd like been inspired to write by some person she actually knew. It's like an ugly hillbilly woman, and I was like, can you not? Like, just, it's not hard to just not be mean to people. And Debbie goes out of her way to be mean to people. It's just, no, not my kind of person. When I turned 20, I knew the time was drawing near. Still, Michael had never seemed to notice that I was female. After 7 years, it was beginning to irritate me, so I played a trick on him, like the mature adult she is, because that's how adults date, right? I asked a young serviceman who was a cool guy and a good friend of Mike's if he would help me play a trick on my pastor. With my arm tightly linked with this young man, we walked up giggling to where Brother Pearl sat with some other men. I sweetly looked up at this guy's face, then down to Michael and said, "Brother Pearl, I'm getting married." I don't really know what I expected him to say. His expression immediately sobered me, making me wish I'd not played the trick. He looked aghast, horrified. You played your part well, Bear. Good job. Of course I tried to laugh it off, saying it was a joke, but I knew at that moment something had changed. He did not think my trick was funny. After we married, Michael told me at that moment he suddenly saw me in a whole different light. He said he'd always taken for granted that I would be there as his buddy, his friend, his helper, his skivvy. Now he knew I'd grown up and would soon be gone. I would be another man's wife, another man's buddy, another man's helper. That sounds miserable. He decided he didn't like that idea. Can you believe how thick-headed this guy was? Now again, call me crazy, but when a considerably older adult spends years befriending and building the trust of a literal child so that they can then go on to marry them and have a sexual relationship with them as soon as it's legal, the word for that is grooming. How is this not grooming? Let's not romanticize that, please. Now, the story of their actual wedding night and honeymoon is told by Michael in his book, Created to Need a Helpmeet, a marriage guide for men, and this is one of the most horrifying things I've ever read. This man is an abusive piece of crap. Bearing in mind, this is a woman who's essentially pined after him for 7 years, they finally got married, and this is what he treats her like. Can't make this up. So she's 20, she's naive, she's entirely inexperienced, she's never been alone with a man before, really, never mind sexually. He is, how old is he at this point, 28? Yeah, 28. And Michael writes, "My immediate goal in marriage was to make up for all those sexually frustrated years. The sooner the better." You mean those years when she was a literal child? A friend of mine that had married 2 years before I did had bragged that he was able to know his bride 5 times on their wedding night. Doubt. He was a puny fellow, so I had no doubt that I would beat his brag. But the truth is, 3 times was all I could muster, and just barely. It was midnight before we got to our room, and we were up at 6, headed to the Gulf Coast, where we would honeymoon for a few days in a cottage by the beach. It was a long day's drive. We arrived at the cottage well after dark. Deb fixed us a big supper, after which I tried to break my record. One time, and I was asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night and remembered that crabs sometimes run along the beach, so I woke Deb excitedly and said, "Let's go crabbing." So to give you an exact timeline, they got married, they had sex 3 times, they had at most like 6 hours of sleep, if that, drove all day until it was dark to get to their honeymoon place, had sex, well, Debbie had to cook a meal, they had sex again, and then they have 2 hours of sleep and he wakes her up to go crabbing. But not just any kind of crabbing, barefoot crabbing, but only for her. The new missus complained about me not giving her enough time to find her tennis shoes. They were still packed somewhere and I was raring to go. Anyway, I'd seen her going barefoot many times. As we scurried along the beach, she complained about not having a flashlight. I was using it up ahead to scout the way to chase crabs. I heard her say something about shells hurting her feet. For the next hour or 2, I ran along the seashore and she dragged along behind, carrying my crab sack. I put out some of those little round traps with bait in them, and we eventually got 6 or 8 of the little pinching critters. Not enough for a meal. I mean, that sounds like, I don't know. Can't eat shellfish. Allergic. I don't know how big a crab is. This was my first time to ever go crabbing and I was having a ball. What more could a fellow ask for? A cottage on the beach, a hot bride, plenty of crabs. This was living. We made it back to the cottage where we grabbed a couple of hours sleep before I woke hungry and had to make love to a woman half asleep. She was willing, but not very active. Was she willing? Was she really? So she's had no sleep. You've got her up, dragged her out barefoot to the point where, spoiler, her feet were bleeding the entire time because she's walking along sharp rocks and broken shells and whatever. He then allows her like a couple of hours more sleep before he wakes up and she's still half asleep, coerces her into sex and just has sex on her or in her, not with her. Generally these days we call that rape. Let's not. Afterwards she got up and fixed us a fine breakfast. Great cook. Her mother taught her well. I hate this man. She wanted to go back to sleep, but I talked her into going back out for more crabs. By mid-afternoon we had a sack full of crabs and headed back to the cottage. Wow, was I tired. I told her I would take a little nap while she prepared supper. I don't know how long I slept, but I awoke to her screeching and jumping about, the crabs crawling all over the cabin. The silly girl had left the sack open when she was trying to get the first crab in the huge boiling kettle. I sat up in bed and offered some constructive advice, and she had a personality change right there in front of me. And us not yet married 48 hours. Can you blame her, really? I don't. Who could have imagined a female could carry on in such a crazy manner? Me. I could have. And I could have predicted she would act like this. Anyone would act like this if you treat them this badly. I tried to calm her down, but she just stomped off, leaving the French fries turning black in the smoking hot oil and the crabs crawling. I yelled at her retreating form, "I don't need to hunt crabs. I married one." Child. To her credit, she did come back and finish cooking. After we ate, I was ready for some more sex, but she just wanted to sleep. You don't say. I'd read in a marriage book how women always have excuses like being sleepy, having a headache, etc. You know, women don't have to make excuses when they actually want to have sex with someone. And they generally actually want to have sex with someone when they're, you know, that person is nice and attractive and treats them well, not when you make them barefoot hunt for crabs. I felt a great sense of satisfaction when I was so completely able to change her mind. It wasn't that difficult. She's wired right. It made me sleepy, so I dozed off again. Again, this is coercion. It's just rape. If you have to coerce someone into it, it's just rape. Okay, it made me sleepy, so I dozed off again. I was just dropping off when I heard the crash. It came from the bathroom. She looked dead, lying there all twisted up in a weird position, half in, half out of the shower. The curtain rod lay flung on the floor around her, and water was spraying everywhere. It was one scary moment. My new bride, dead on our honeymoon. I quickly turned off the water and bent to cradle her in my arms. I gently shook her while examining her injured forehead, which was quickly swelling and turning blue. "What's wrong, honey? Are you sick?" After she opened her eyes, it took her a minute to focus, and then her expression changed. It was a mixture of pity and anger, although her voice was like a deep sigh as she whispered, "You really don't know, do you?" Man, it sounded like she was accusing me or something. Since she was hurt, I let her have her say, and boy, she laid it on. She sat up, pulling herself away from me, turning where she could look me straight in the face. The gist of what she said was something along the lines of, "In the last 48 hours, I haven't slept more than 2 hours undisturbed. My feet have 20 or more tiny holes in them because you wouldn't let me take an extra 5 minutes to unpack my tennis shoes. My shoulder is sore from trying to carry 30 pounds of crab for hours." They didn't weigh that much. "My hand is burned from trying to stuff a fighting crab into a kettle of boiling water, which seems very much like torturing the poor thing, and all while you lie in a state of repose. Due to lack of sleep and sun, my eyes feel like they're full of sand. I've had little to eat. I'm a female, for crying out loud. I just want to sleep without you pawing on me. Besides, I have body parts I didn't even know existed until now, and they're killing me. So what's wrong with me? I'm the weaker vessel, remember? It's in the Bible, chapter 1, verse 1 or something. So I don't like her saying that women are weaker and like, no, absolutely not. Come on, have you met us? But yeah, I absolutely get where she's coming from, and I hate that he still has to undermine all she's been through and her feelings. Like, they didn't weigh that much. I hate him. And his response to all this, the takeaway from this whole story is he says, "Strange creatures are these females." what the hell is wrong with this man? He tells it like this, it's this funny, silly, cutesy little story of, oh, women are so silly. No, this is a story of you abusing your wife to the point where she was in tears and telling you what you did wrong, and you're just like, no, it wasn't a bad. I hate him. I thoroughly hate him. Now, you might be thinking this was just a blip at the start of their marriage. Some people have that, I guess. Some don't. But no, this trend of Michael just being oblivious to anyone else's needs and just horrible to Debi, and then also just using her for sex whenever he wants. Ooh, it's a trend that has continued throughout their whole marriage. This is another story, this time from Debi's perspective, from her book Created to Be His Helpmeet. Different books. Preparing to Be His Helpmeet, Create to Be His Helpmeet. Different but similar vibes. In this one, Debi writes, as a general rule, my husband doesn't take out the trash. I could be annoyed, or I could learn to enjoy taking out the trash. I'm smart. I've learnt to really enjoy taking the trash out. One day recently, my husband saw me struggling out the door with a huge sack of trash in one hand and several empty boxes in the other. Since he was heading in that direction, he volunteered to carry the heavy sack. He walked about 10 feet ahead of me, holding the sack out from his body with one hand. I knew he was just showing me how strong he was. I was amused, as usual, with his display of manhood. Really, that's a display of manhood. After nearly 35 years of having me appreciate his muscles, you'd think he would tire of showing off, but he knows that I have never tired of watching him perform. Oh, you don't want to yuck someone's yum, but at the same time, how can anyone find this abusive piece of trash attractive? No. When he got near the large trash trailer, he was really getting into his macho thing. With great fanfare, he flung, I would say tossed, but it's like a sideways catapult, the large trash bag as if it were a cement block instead of a thin plastic bag, too loaded down for its own strength. That was me tossing the rubbish. Okay, I'm getting into this, getting into character. I'm imagining I'm an abusive man. Ooh, you know. Of course, the string broke, allowing the bag to hit the side of the trailer, bursting open and dumping the trash all over the ground. I could tell he was a little embarrassed as I rushed over to clean up his mess, but he continued on his merry way. Pick up your rubbish. Oh, men. I remember a time when all of this would have irritated me to the point of bitterness, and we wouldn't blame you, Debi. I would have made sure he felt my irritation and our relationship would have been strained, all for a bag of trash. Such a stupid waste of our lives. But now, as I watched him humbly slink off, I had to grin. I think I finally come to understand the male psyche. At least, this male's. So a psychopath, you've come to understand a psychopath. Actually, no, that's not fair to psychopaths. Michael Pearl is much worse. I know that the dumped trash bag was hard on the old boy. It's funny that men think women are so difficult to understand, but can you imagine a woman flinging a heavy garbage sack to prove how strong she is, then having spilled it, leaving it for someone else to clean up? I can't imagine any decent person doing that, to be honest. I don't think it's a man thing. I think it's a crappy person thing. Having come to this lofty understanding of the male ego, I knew Big Papa would look for any chance to take out the trash from now on, and always do it right. His chance came about 2 weeks later when I was heading out the back door with another heavy sack. I graciously showed my thanks as he offered to take the bag out. Just as he stepped out the door, I raced for the laundry room window. This is where it gets weird, right? Very weird. Quickly raising the window about 3 inches, I waited for him to come round to the trash trailer, which is directly in front of the laundry room window. This time he carefully and gently pitched the heavy sack, and I was ready. Just as the sack left his hand, I let out a blood-curdling scream. You'd think he'd get used to my tricks after all these years, but I got him again. I don't quite get what the trick is, but we carry on. I wish you could have seen his reaction. I don't. Oh God. His t-shirt shook as if a strong wind had hit him, as every inch of his body quivered with shock. Of course, my own body was in spasms of wild laughter. It took him a moment or two to realise the sack had landed safely, and the scream was in no way related to the trash bag he'd just thrown. I had so rattled his nerves with my wild war whoop that he seemed to take a second to realise that I'd done it again. Oh, it was a grand moment, until he turned to meet me, eye to laughing eyes, and I knew I would have to pay for my rowdy entertainment. His adult brain quickly came back to the present, and he took off running back to the house at a speed the likes of which I thought he had long since become incapable. I knew there was no sense in trying to hide, because he would find me sooner or later, so I decided to use my innocent lady pose. I sweetly stepped in front of the sink and began to wash the dishes, suppressing my laughter with great difficulty. He sounded like a Big Mac truck coming through the door, but I just kept my back turned and continued to wash the dishes. My demure stance did not stop him. He grabbed me by the arm and started pulling me into the bedroom. Since he outweighs me by 100 pounds, it was no contest, although he had to drag me all the way. This sounds rapey. This sounds like rape. I could only imagine what the office staff right next door might think if they'd happen to drop in at that moment. I was ready with another scream, just in case our very reserved business manager appeared. Can anyone in the comments please tell me what the hell did I just read? I know. So that's the real Michael and Debi Pearl. That is who they are. Yeah, let's find out about their kids and grandkids who now also work for the ministry alongside them, shall we? So the website features their 5 kids, including Rebecca, who has had a very full life, having helped her parents' ministry with servicemen, then spent her teen years living among the Amish, off to college to study linguistics, and then at 22 years old, she went to live in a Kumboy village on a mountain in Papua New Guinea to translate scripture. It was her ministry that opened up the idea of the good and evil Bible story that has won millions to the Lord and given the gospel to hundreds of thousands of Muslims. Her and her husband have 6 mostly grown children that are honouring and loving Jesus. What a life! Debi has a weird preoccupation with wanting to convert Muslims. It's very odd. You see it a lot in her novel, what was the novel called? The Vision, that was it. Her novel, The Vision. A big focus on that is like using this weird graphic novel of the Bible that is translated into every language in the world, to convert Muslims. It's very odd. There's also Gabriel Pearl, the firstborn son of Michael and Debi Pearl. He is a leader in his community, a man of integrity, doubt. A fine example to the many young men he employs and teaches. Again, doubt. Gabriel is a builder, hunter, outdoorsman, and volleyball king. He's married to Elizabeth, a saved Amish girl who truly loves the Lord. We adore her. Gabe has 5 children. Nathan is the Pearl's 3rd child. Like his dad, Nathan has a love for study, writing, and awful pun. Oh, for God's sake. He's married to Zephyr. They have 4 children. They live in Hawaii. There's Shalom and Shoshana. We don't really know much about them. They're not as active. I believe, I don't know, I might be wrong. I think it's one of Rebecca's children who now runs the No Greater Joy Facebook page. It's definitely a grandchild, and I think it might be one of Rebecca's, but who knows? Honestly, we don't really need to know about the rest because they don't post as much, but the big ones you'll see in this are, well, Nathan's the big one. He won't stop talking. Now, words. I have really conflicting feelings about the Pearl children, because on the one hand now, they are spreading just as much hate and bigotry and nastiness and dangerous misinformation as their parents. However, we can't ignore the fact that they are victims of abuse. But they're also now at that age where they are perpetuating the cycle of abuse and abusing their children in turn. And then one day their children, it seems, are going to do it to their children. So it's really hard to know how to feel towards them and about them. I thought at this point it might be useful to give you a little reminder of how the Pearls actually raise these children and how they tell other people to treat their children. And I have picked out a few short extracts from the To Train Up a Child book that I reviewed, like I say, 6 or 7 years ago. If you want something more in-depth with more commentary, go check out those original 2 videos. But if you just want the highlights of the first half of the book, here you go. So they call training a child obedience training, and they say training does not necessarily require that the trainee be capable of reason. Even mice and rats can be trained to respond to stimuli. Careful training can make a dog perfectly obedient. If a seeing eye dog can be so perfectly trained as to be trusted to consistently lead a blind man through the obstacles of a city street, shouldn't a parent expect more out of an intelligent child? Training is a technique that always works on every child, unless that child ends up dead, I guess, which has happened to 7 of them. To neglect training is to create miserable circumstances for yourself and your child. Not true. Many of you have bypassed the training and expected the discipline alone to affect proper behaviour. The Pearls are also the ones who, if not invented, they at least popularised blanket training, which is something that you see a lot of fundy mums doing now, and it's absolutely barbaric. They write in the book, "There's so much satisfaction in training up a child. It's easy and at the same time challenging. When my children were able to crawl, in the case of one roll, around the room, I set up a training session. Try it yourself. Place an object of delight where they can reach it, maybe in a no-no corner or on an apple juice table. When they spy it and make a dive for it, in a calm voice say, 'No, don't touch it.' They will already be familiar with the no, so they will pause, look at you in wonder, then turn around and grab it. Switch their hand, as in hit them with a branch, and don't worry, they give instructions for what kind of branch to use later, and simultaneously say no. Remember, you are not disciplining, you are training. One spat with a little switch is enough, and they will again pull back their hand and consider the relationship between the object, their desire, the command, and the little reinforcing pain. It may take several times, but if you're consistent, they always learn to perfectly obey even in your absence." So the idea is you set up something to entice your child, and when your child falls for this, you physically hurt them to teach them not to have desires. It's so messed up. By your enforcement, he is learning about moral government, duty, responsibility, and in the event of failure, accountability, rewards, and punishment. In the here and now, he is also learning not to touch, which makes a child's social life a lot more pleasant. It takes a few minutes to train a child not to touch a given object. Most children can be brought into complete and joyous subjection in just 3 days. Complete and joyous subjection, come on. In just 3 days. Thereafter, if you continue to be faithful, the child will remain happy and obedient. By obedient, I mean you will never have to tell him anything twice. If you expect to receive instant obedience and train to that end, you'll always get it. Some people say childproof your home. I say home-proof your child. And this then is taken a step further with their idea of blanket training, which basically means when your baby's starting to crawl or something like that, you place a blanket on the floor and tell them to stay on the blanket. If they leave the blanket, you hit them and put them back on the blanket. If they try and leave the blanket again, you hit them. And it trains a child to stay in one place and not move. It is absolutely barbaric. There are plenty more of other examples as well of like inflicting pain to get what you want. Remember, you are establishing a pattern of command control to be used the rest of his youth. If he touches glasses, like again, you put like an object to tempt them, in this case glasses. Again, saying no, inflict minor pain. Not enough to make him cry, unless he is a crybaby, and then don't worry about it. He will pull his hand back and try to comprehend the association of grabbing the glasses and pain. Inevitably, he will return to the bait to test his new theory. Sure enough, again, the glasses caused pain, and the pain is always accompanied by a quiet little no. It may take 1 or 2 more tries for him to give up his career as a glasses snatcher, but he will. And when I say babies, I really do mean babies, like newborn babies they will inflict pain on. Like here, that says, "One particularly painful experience of nursing mothers is the biting baby. My wife wasted no time finding a cure. When the baby bit, she pulled hair. An alternative has to be sought for bald-headed babies. Now, the baby is not being punished, just conditioned. But you're still inflicting pain on a newborn baby and like pulling his hair. Like their skulls aren't even melded together yet. Like they're very, very sensitive up there. You can't go around pulling a baby's hair. For God's sake. I, a woman who never wants kids, seem to have more empathy for children than these two actual parents. Horrifying. If you don't want to hit your child with a branch, you can always thump them. To train the child, place the ball within easy reach. When he reaches out, say, no, and thump his hand, like... He will pull his hand back, momentarily looking alarmed, and reach out again. Repeat the process saying no in a calm voice and thumping the hand. After several times, you can eat in peace. Again, keep in mind, the baby is not being punished, just conditioned. The thump is not a substitute rod, it's simply reinforcement to obedience training. So basically they mean, you can thump him in some situations, but make sure you still beat him with a branch as well. Both are necessary, apparently. By the way, all the things we got there were from the first 8 pages of a 100-page book. There is so much nonsense in here, and it goes on, it goes on. One of our girls who developed mobility early had a fascination with crawling up the stairs. At 4 months, she was too unknowing to be punished for disobedience, but for her own good, we attempted to train her not to climb the stairs by coordinating the voice command of no with little spats on the bare legs with a 12-inch long, 1/8-inch diameter sprig from a willow tree. They beat their barely crawling baby, 4 months old, they beat their 4-month-old baby with a willow branch. 4 months. Before they can decide to do good, we must condition them to do good. You may have strong feelings that prevent you from spanking your child, but it's not love. God, who made little children and therefore knows what's best for them, has told parents to employ the rod in training up a child. To refrain from doing so based on a claim of love is an indictment on God himself. Your actions assume that either God does not desire what's best for your child, or that you know better than he. Some parents fail to use the rod because of peer pressure. They may be in disagreement with their own parents about child training. The modern parent is bombarded with propaganda, supposedly based on the latest psychological research, which villainizes biblically based child rearing. Can't speak. The parents are shamed and caused to look over their shoulder before applying discipline. He's really here saying that, like, it's better to beat your child because an old ancient book says it than listen to experts who say this will damage your child physically and psychologically. Stop it. Do you comfort your children with a rod? If you have not seen the rod as a comfort to your child, you've missed its purpose. This is bad. Listen to this bit. If you're just beginning to attempt to control an already rebellious child who runs from discipline and is too incoherent to listen, then use whatever force is necessary to bring him to bay. If you have to sit on him to spank him, then do not hesitate, and hold him there until he is surrendered. Prove that you are bigger, tougher, more patiently enduring, and are unmoved by his wailing. Defeat him totally. Accept no conditions for surrender, no compromise. You are to rule over him as a benevolent sovereign. Your word is final. This is monstrous. This is absolutely sickening and monstrous. They're insane. They're absolutely insane. Otherwise, tell him to bend over on the bed or couch, and while he's in this position, give him some choice admonition. You have his undivided attention. Slowly begin to spank. If you go too fast, you may not allow time enough for the inner transformation to occur. Use your own judgment as to what is effective. I found 5 to 10 licks usually sufficient. Sometimes with older children, usually when the licks are not forceful enough, the child may still be rebellious. If this occurs, take time to instruct and then continue the spanking. Never stop the disciplinary action until the child is surrendered. They're insane. There's no other word for it. They're absolutely insane. They get joy out of beating children. They seem to enjoy beating children. It's some weird power trip for them. I hate it. I hate it. Oh God. Oh, this is the word. Okay, last bit, but this is one of the worst bits. Any spanking to effectively reinforce instruction must cause pain, but the most pain is on the surface of bare skin where the nerves are located. A surface sting will cause sufficient pain with no injury or bruising, because they wouldn't want to get caught by CPS, would they? Select your instrument according to the child's size. For the under 1 year olds, a little 10 to 12 long willowy branch stripped of any knots that might break the skin, about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, is sufficient. Sometimes alternatives have to be sought. A 1-foot ruler or its equivalent in a paddle is a sufficient alternative. For the larger child, a belt or larger tree branch is effective. I hate this. There's one version of the book out there which, or maybe it's later in the book, where they also say, like, if like the branch isn't enough or something like that, you can't get, like, use a ceramic pipe of this diameter and this length. It's like barbaric, absolutely barbaric. There's no other word for this. And like I say, this only takes up to halfway through the book. This is only the first 50 pages. There's another 50 to go. terrible. If you want to see them, go check out the other videos. I'll leave all the links in my Michael and Debi Pill playlist in the video description. So this is what I mean. This is how they raise their children. And I absolutely do feel for their kids. But their kids are now adults themselves and doing this exact same thing to their children and releasing this 30th anniversary edition of the book where they reinforce this stuff even more. There's only so much sympathy you can have with victims after they become child abusers themselves, you know? So this is kind of the background. This is who the Pearls are. This is how they were brought up. This is what they have taught in the past. Let's take a look at where they are today. We're going to start with their most active social media platform, and that is Facebook, because apparently people still use that. This is mostly run by one of the grandchildren. Again, I can't remember exactly which one, but it's definitely one who's unmarried without kids. Know that much. And that will come up later. That's an important thing to note. Let's start randomly. Okay, this is a post which is kind of anti-self-love, anti-self-esteem. Sadly, this is the kind of thing we actually see from quite a lot of fundies today. Carissa Collins is really big on it. Girl Defined are really big on it. This idea that don't love yourself, don't do anything for yourself, don't take care of yourself. Wild, I know. So one of the adult granddaughters writes, "It is a crucial human aspiration to seek love and acceptance. We all crave it as we are made in God's image and created to desire fellowship with Him. When life becomes too much and we inevitably feel overwhelmed as a result of living in a broken world, it's completely natural to search for comfort. This is why the self-love movement has become so popular today for many Christian women. And honestly, I can relate. Life is hard and it's nice to feel good. Self-love theology promises safety, healing, peace, and fulfillment, which sounds, well, good. The problem is the world's definition of self-love is anything but. No, your definition of self-love is what's messed up. You're building a straw man here. You all do. A popular self-love advocate wrote, "Loving yourself means putting yourself first, even being selfish at times, and making sure you are well taken care of by you, yourself, before you even think about taking care of others. It's putting yourself at the heart of everything you do." Oof. I see nothing wrong with that. I really don't. The huge issue here is not that the author wants fulfillment and care. The problem is that she claims you can attain it by replacing God with self as the object of veneration. Come on. For us Christians, when we decided to trust in Jesus, we gave him our whole heart. We determined that he is our God and there shall be no other. Self-love requires the participant to elevate themselves above God, Lucifer's original sin. In fact, anything that we elevate above God is sin. It is the very opposite of what we as followers of Christ are commanded to do. So Christians, why are we doing it? Probably for the same reasons that we allow divorce, homosexuality, women pastors, and any other sort of wickedness to seep into our body. It's hard to be an uncompromising Christian in America, not because of too much tribulation, but rather the lack thereof. Blah blah blah. Self-love culture is easy to accept because it doesn't feel malicious, because it's not. Where God's way demands repentance and self-denial, that sounds exhausting, self-love offers acceptance and self-gratification, which looks attractive. It is attractive, it's very nice, very healthy, we love it. But ladies, I implore you, don't fall for it. Don't taste the seductive fruit of unrighteousness. Satan knows that you are held in the protective arms of a loving Savior, and he hates it. He wants to destroy you, your whole family, and everything you love. And he will do it through flowery words and sweet deceptions. In the same way he tempted Eve in the garden through her own desires, he wants to tempt you. You must guard your hearts. So moving forward, I want you to remember these truths. Stop searching for love inside yourself and look instead to the actual source, your creator. I guarantee that he will do a better job of caring for you than you ever will. So like I said before, we've seen a lot of fundies talking about this stuff, from Girl Defined, Carissa Collins, Paul and Morgan. A lot of people, they are really, really against looking after yourself, doing a little bit of self-care, and I really don't understand why. Well, I kind of do. There's a massive push to stop thinking about yourself and caring about yourself, and instead to only follow the rules of whatever religion the person saying it is a part of. You need to do the religious thing and not actually do anything for yourself that's in your own self-interest. It's, funnily enough, something that checks a lot of boxes in Hassan's BITE model that's used for identifying cults and their methods to recruit and maintain control over people. This idea that you reduce how much someone feels like an individual, you take away a lot of their free will, you stop them caring for themselves, and you have to make them focused on other people, you make them feel these big feelings of guilt and stuff like they're all checkpoints in the bite model, you know? If you demonize a person for thinking for themselves or even for just caring for themselves, then you stop them being able to question or even push back against you and your religion in any way. It's manipulative and it's cruel, and it is entirely selfish. If a person genuinely has your best interests at heart, then they won't be threatened by you simply caring for yourself, looking after yourself, prioritizing your health and well-being, because that's not a selfish thing to do. It's just an important part of being human. Like, I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, like, you can't pour from an empty cup, and it's cliched, but it's true. You need to look after your own core needs before you can be expected to help anyone else. I personally like to advocate for using the phrase self-focused instead of selfish, because there is a difference to me. Like, being selfish is about doing something for yourself despite knowing it will be to the detriment of others, whereas doing something self-focused is knowing that you're doing something to your benefit so that you can go ahead and help other people in the future. You know, there's a big difference there. The pearls and other fundies seem to act like acts of self-focus are completely selfish, while being completely oblivious to how actually selfish their messed up worldview is. You'll also find a lot of kind of, terrible graphics like this with parenting advice on their Facebook page. Mostly it's complaining about how you shouldn't be kind to children because they'll never learn to fear us and be obedient if you're too nice to them. It's all terrifying. Taking their cure, I think that's meant to be taking their cure. Is that meant to be taking their cue? Is that just a bad typo? Taking their cue/cure from secular wisdom, misguided parents try to build up their child's self-image by means of positive affirmation. It's troubling to see parents trying to purge their children of guilt or low self-esteem with empty, sweet words. No child can be led from the pit of self-condemnation by heaping empty praise on him. He knows better. Until the praise is earned, the child feels all the worst for the unfounded condemnation. Praise and positive affirmations are indispensable nourishment to the child's soul, but the child must believe that the praise is rooted in sincere reality. Yeah, because you wouldn't want to be accidentally building up a child's self-esteem for no reason, would you? Another post says, teach your children to be thankful by example, and then by arranging your home life so that they must earn access to the pleasurable areas of life. They must see the link between labour and reward, between things and cost. Like, I'm all for, like, you know, making your kids do chores to earn some pocket money, whatever, that's fine. This takes it a step too far. It is well known that the coddled are not as competent in positions of responsibility than those who worked their way to the top. If children do not see the connection between what you provide and their consumption, they will not be appreciative. In America, the only child that has ever thanked his parent for a mattress is the one who's had to sleep on the floor. I don't think it should be a controversial view for me to say kids should not be expected to thank their parents for providing the bare minimum for their existence, like a bed. When you chose to have kids, you chose to provide for them, and you have to deal with that. That means you give them shelter, a bed, food, clean clothes, you know, the basics. These kids didn't ask to be born. They shouldn't be, I wouldn't say grateful, but they shouldn't be made to, like, feel like they owe you something for that, you know? In this next short post, which links to a longer blog post, but we're not going to cover that just now, they actually admit to wanting to indoctrinate their children. School is bad, apparently, because it teaches them stuff and brainwashes them, and children should only be brainwashed if it's by the pearls, apparently. One of the greatest lies of our culture is that we should believe public school is not only good, but also crucial to the healthy development of children. In reality, there's nothing healthy or good about sending your children to spend 8 hours a day in an immoral environment. In this environment, they're trained how to think, feel, and act by strangers who have a completely different worldview to you. As a parent, it's up to you alone to determine that they receive the right kind of training, regardless of what society thinks. This first line here about, like, school not being crucial to a child's development, like, do they not realize how important socialization is for young children? How important it is to a child's development to mix with other people of different backgrounds and beliefs and different experiences? Like, if you're trying to keep your child isolated from anyone remotely different, then it's no wonder they grow up having absolutely no empathy for anyone else. Madness. They also offer marriage advice on Facebook. There are lots of posts about how to be a good wife, what marriage means to them, how you shouldn't actually be happy in a marriage because that's not a godly marriage. Who wants to be happy anyway? If you desire to have a godly marriage, your creator left written instructions for you to follow. I don't mean a good marriage, I mean a godly marriage. The pursuit is not to apprehend happiness, the pursuit is to apprehend holiness. That sounds miserable, absolutely miserable. This post I'm not going to read out loud because it's long, but there's a whole essay from someone complaining that a server wasn't happy with their job. It's just an unnecessary post. We don't need to be complaining about strangers publicly like this. It's unnecessary, it's rude, I feel really bad for the woman they're talking about. I just don't need to. There's also a hell of a lot of anger on the Facebook page towards child-free people, or even just people who might want kids but have decided they can't afford them yet, or they don't want to for health reasons or some other reasons, or whatever. Like, just people who don't have kids, a lot of anger towards them, which is, again, is strange coming from a woman who is neither married nor has kids. It's very odd. The first time I heard someone say children are unaffordable, I thought it was a joke. And honestly, it still is a joke, just one that too many people have accepted as reality. And Gen Z, my generation, is the target audience. I get so confused by all this, like, Gen Z, Gen X. Actually, what am I? I am just about a millennial. Just. Kind of. I'm a millennial. There we go. I get very confused though. It just kind of goes over my head. I don't really like those labels. Anyway, blah blah blah. Gen Z's target audience, me, cool. Young people like me are told constantly that if we have children, we will be swimming in debt and pinching pennies for the rest of our lives. Furthermore, our quality of life will drastically decrease because we will no longer be able to do the things we love. I'm not a parent myself, but let me share with you my personal experience. When my parents got married, having a family was very important to them. They only had 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys, and my mum managed the house and homeschooled all of us while my dad worked to support us as a general contractor. Truthfully, we didn't have much money. I wouldn't say we were poor, but we were definitely careful with finances. For all my childhood, my family only had older vehicles, and we fixed them when they broke. My parents were very intentional about not having any debt. We also never ate out, rarely went shopping, and only bought new things if they were on sale. Because of this frugal lifestyle, we never lacked for anything. We always had plenty of food to eat, a decent car to drive, and clothes to wear. Even to this day, I can't think of anything that I regret not getting in my childhood. Our lives were so full of joy, peace, and fun. It was all about having valuable experiences as a family, not valuable things. One of my favourite quotes is from my mum, who is wonderfully practical and blunt. She always said, "Your kids are never going to look back on their childhood and lovingly remember their brand new iPad or your $90,000 vehicle. All that status stuff is stupid. What they will remember is how much time you invested in them and the adventures you had together." And that was how we lived, and life was wonderfully sweet. With a single-income household, my parents successfully homeschooled 4 children. Their lives were not diminished in any way, just different. The sacrifices they made for us, if you could even call them that, were insignificant, because to them there was nothing more important than the 4 souls they were responsible for bringing into the world. And that was just my tiny family of 6. Most of my young friends came from families with 8, 9, 10, even 11 kids, all homeschooled and thriving in modern America, despite the false claims. Think about this. People have been having children and raising families literally since the beginning of time, and in conditions that were way less ideal than mine. Children were born and raised throughout all the major wars, during the Great Depression era, and in the middle of the wilderness. And again, this is something we hear all the time from people like Carissa Collins, and I just feel like it's so damn selfish. Like, I completely understand that you don't need millions in the bank to have a kid. That's unrealistic and silly. And I'm also very aware that there are parents who don't have very much who can still be excellent parents. Like, I have my own issues with my parents, but the lack of money we had growing up was never the main problem. That was something they always dealt with quite well. Our household income was below £10,000 a year, and we got by, you know. There's things that I kind of like wish I could have done. Like, I wish my parents could have afforded to like send me to some extracurricular stuff. I'd have loved to have like joined a drama group or something, but or like learned to play a musical instrument. That would have been great. But there are the things you have to go without, and yeah, I don't know. However, we cannot ignore the fact that, especially today, with the cost of living rising constantly, raising kids is expensive. Having kids is expensive. And just how expensive that is entirely depends on where you are and, what country you live in is a big thing. Deciding that you don't think you can afford to have kids or waiting a while until you think you can afford it more is not selfish. It's just sensible. It's responsible. Kids deserve to have all their needs met, and I can't help but feel like people like this who are just like, oh, it's fine, just have them no matter what the circumstances, are being selfish because maybe they don't actually know what it's like to live in poverty, and they're not really understanding that there are children out there who don't have a roof over their heads. They don't have regular meals. They don't have clean clothes. They don't have a proper access to education, And that's what people are worried about. Not, ooh, I can't afford a $90,000 car. It's, where's the next meal coming from? Can I pay my electricity bill this month? When people like this are like, oh, just have them no matter what, they're putting their own selfish needs above the actual physical needs of a child, and that is entirely selfish. Who cares if I can't feed them this month? At least they're alive for now, is not a good way to live. And like I say, most people are worried about not affording kids. It's not because, oh, they can't afford an iPad. Oh, they can't afford a $90,000 car. They're worried about, are these medical bills going to put me in debt for the rest of my life? Are they going to bankrupt me? Can I afford to buy my kid a school uniform, feed them, buy milk formula if I can't breastfeed? Like, all these basic things. What if your child has health problems or has to go to the doctor regularly? That's going to rack up bills as well if you live in countries like America that don't have the NHS. People like this grandchild of Michael and Debi, people like Carissa Collins, they're always so focused on, well, just have more children anyway, even if you can't look after them. Just have them anyway, instead of addressing the real problem, which is the fact that there are people out there who do want kids and can't afford them because the cost of living is so much. And that's why we absolutely need to invest more as a society into social care systems that will help people raise their kids, provide decent education, healthcare, social care. Like, that is what matters. Helping people with the basic costs of living, keeping costs down so people can actually afford a home and to pay their bills. That's what we need to be focusing on, not on telling people, oh, just have kids anyway. It doesn't matter if you can't look after them. Wild, absolutely wild. She ends that post by saying, yet today, when there's never been an easier time to raise a child, how out of touch are you? You hear more people complaining about how impossibly difficult we are literally in a cost of living crisis. It is harder now to raise and afford a child than it has been for the last, 50, 60, 70 years. I'm not going to try to puzzle through the reason behind this. It's usually weirder than anything I can envision. But I will say that the more people remove themselves from God and embrace Satan's influence, the more perversion will seep into every facet of their lives. God says children are blessings and that it's good when we have them. So naturally, Satan's followers are going to hate children. In opposition to this messed up childless trend, I want to encourage you to be a rebel. Have children. Have a bunch of them. Have 15 if you want. You'll be okay. I guarantee it. Except you can't guarantee it, can you? Do you have any idea about the health problems that pregnant people face? The amount of women who die in childbirth is still insanely high, and that is even higher for women of colour. They're a massive risk. Having babies, pregnancy, is not something you go into lightly. It's not like, oh, you'll be fine, you promise. You are putting your life at risk, and you are bringing a life into this world that you need to make sure you can take care of. It genuinely deserves proper consideration. And also, I hate that she can't begin to imagine why people might not want kids. Where have you been living? How out of touch with the real world do you have to be that you can't understand why people might be concerned about not being able to afford kids or not want it? It frustrates me. It frustrates me so much. She apparently got a little bit of backlash to this, especially because she is an unmarried, childless woman herself. And I say childless because she wants children but doesn't have them. I would call myself child-free because I don't want children and don't have them. There's a different, I'm making an active choice in my life to say I don't want children, but she is saying I want them but I don't have them yet, so she's childless. You get the difference? Yeah. Okay, she said, last week I posted my commentary on the trending child-free epidemic. The response to my post was honestly more controversial than I'd anticipated, and within the comment section there were a lot of interesting conversations. One of the biggest arguments presented was that I, the author, was unqualified to be writing about such a topic because I'm not a parent myself. I'd say it wasn't so much the inexperience that was the problem, but the massive ignorance for what the real world is like. That was the problem. It was said that I was an inexperienced child, a sheltered idiot, egregiously tone deaf, severely ignorant, and hilariously stupid. They're a little harsher than what I would say, but I agree with the sentiment. I don't think I'd call her names, but I will say she's ignorant. I was told that I must go have my own children before I can have an opinion on this subject. Until then, my critics informed me, anything I say is immediately invalidated. While I can appreciate these creative adjectives, I'm a writer after all, I do have to disagree. Sorry. And although it may seem like this is going to be a restatement of my original post, that's not exactly the point I'm going to make. I really want to bring attention to something I already mentioned, and that's this one. One of the major arguments from my anti-family audience was that I cannot have this conversation until I have kids. The common phraseology was that I needed to have the lived experience. Well, I do think she needs more experience, but not necessarily in just raising kids. Yeah, no. You see, it wasn't until very recently that the woke agenda began to swallow our culture. As a result, many of us are now convinced that the natural order of things is to be hypersensitive to the experiences of others, outraged constantly and easily offended when someone breathes the wrong way. To be honest, this is getting really exhausting. Furthermore, it's wrong. Just imagine, this is quite funny, just imagine if Thomas Jefferson had done this in 1776. Sorry guys, I'd love to write this document or whatever, but I just don't think we have the lived experience of being an independent nation to declare anything. Why don't we ask Britain what they think? I do find that quite funny. You see, the whole basis of this argument requires someone to have both an inordinate amount of faith and an equal measure of willful ignorance. That is because there is this delightful, innovative thing called the truth. The truth is cool because it doesn't actually care about anyone's experiences. The truth couldn't care less who states it. It is completely unpersuaded by the anger-induced tantrums of the unhappy adult-sized toddlers. Speak for yourself, love. Even if everyone in the world disagreed with the truth, it would still be the same because unlike our sick, exhausting, irritating culture, the truth never changes. I have a lot of thoughts here. I'm not sure I can possibly cover everything I want to say in this video because time, but I will agree that I don't think it matters if she herself has a kid or not, but I think what we need to acknowledge is that no matter what her current circumstances are, she has absolutely every right to say for herself whether she wants to have kids or not, and she has absolutely no right to tell other people whether they should be having kids or not. It doesn't matter if she's had them or not herself, she doesn't get to dictate other people's lives, but she does have a say of her own. Do you know what I mean? Let's say a person has had kids and they want to share with the world, hey, so this was my experience, this is what childbirth was like, this is what was great, this is what was difficult, let me share it so you can make an informed decision for yourself about what you want to do. Or, on the other hand, if a child-free person says, hey, this is why I came to my decision to not have kids, let me share my experiences so you can make an informed decision about what you want to do, both of them are absolutely fine, and it's about their personal experiences and sharing to kind of allow other people to access information from both sides. It doesn't necessarily matter what their experience was, it's just that they're sharing it and allowing people to make their own decisions from that. That's all absolutely fine. The problem arises when a person, whether they've had kids or not, says, you should be doing this with your body. You should be doing... Like, this granddaughter literally says, have children, have a bunch of them, you'll be okay, I promise. You can't promise that, you don't know that, and stop telling other people what to do with their bodies. That's what's the problem here. I also do agree with the comment. I think they were harsh, calling her all those names, but I think they were right in the fact that she is ignorant of what the real world is like. She is unmarried and doesn't have kids, and she still lives with her parents, and she has been very sheltered. She says that she didn't think they had much money, but they got by, but clearly she's never actually lived in poverty. She doesn't know what it's like to have no money, to be stuck wearing clothes that are hand-me-downs that are too small for you, or worrying that your parents skipping a meal so you can eat as a kid. I don't think she's ever had to live through that, and she's definitely never been the parent in that situation, so she doesn't know what it's like. So there is that ignorance there, and it really annoyed me that she saw these people pointing out basic common sense of saying, hey, you don't know what it's like, you're not speaking from an informed place. it really annoyed me that she just turned around, she's like, oh, you're all just woke. I hate how fundies use that like it's an insult, and it's like, come on. It's not really, is it? Also, how can you say it's hypersensitive to care about other people's experiences? This just shows to me you have an absolute lack of empathy, care, or compassion for other people. It is wild. How do you not care what other people have gone through and experienced? That just, wild, wild. This whole post to me just screams someone who is young and naive and inexperienced, parroting the talking points that she's heard her parents and grandparents use over the years, and yet she doesn't fully understand where they come from or why she believes that stuff. She's just repeating what she's heard over and over, because it's what the Pearls do. They don't raise their children, they don't teach them to think for themselves, they train their children to parrot the things they believe, just without question. And on the one hand, I do feel empathy for this girl, like, and her ignorance, and like, I want to be like, hey, sweetie, it's okay, like, you can learn, you can grow, this is all good. But at the same time, like, over my years on YouTube, I've seen just how harmful this level of ignorance can be, and it's just getting really hard to empathize with these people who willfully spread such ignorant hatred. You know, it's so conflicting. Then there was this absolute nonsense post, which reminded me of, you know, Paul of Paul and Morgan. I think I saw it on the Fundy Snark subreddit. He made various points like this when this happened. But when Donald Trump was shot in the tip of the ear, it shouldn't be funny, but when you say it like that, when he was shot in the tip of the ear, there's this photo of this like woman, one of his like security agents, like jumping in front of him, and she's like, oh, you know, like doing her job. And a bunch of men got really upset about that. Paul got really upset about it, and this granddaughter, who's not a man, but she also got really upset about it, and it's wild, ridiculous. Call me weird, but while watching Trump get ushered off stage surrounded by Secret Servicemen, all I could see was the woman in the front. She stood out so much because something in me knew she wasn't supposed to be there. Hear me out. God designed men to fight and protect. Men are naturally more aggressive, stronger, bigger, and faster. Women will never be equal to men in that respect. She has clearly not met half men I'm friends with. I love a nice, soft, sensitive man. Aggression just doesn't do anything for me. No. Women will never be equal to men in that respect. As a woman, I have no problem with that, and here is why. The real truth is, men will never be equal to us in other respects. The lie that is pushed on us women is not so simple as we are equal to men in every measure. The lie is more complicated than that. We are not just told that we are exactly the same as men, we are also told with the same coin that we should disdain our natural design. This is so wrong. As a rule, women are more empathetic, more inclined to care, more nurturing, more qualified to bring peace and comfort in times of distress. As a rule, maybe, but not everyone follows that rule. Not a nurturer. Except with dogs. Only women can be mothers, not true. Only women can be that gentle, not true. Steady influence behind, that gentle, steady influence behind every productive man, again, not true. The abilities that women have are incredible and powerful, just as the abilities that men have. We are both able to embrace our God-given roles. It creates perfect harmony, which is, of course, exactly how he designed it. Imagine that. When we're told we should be dissatisfied with our design, it pushes us to fulfill someone else's role. This creates an imbalance. It is an unsustainable system that we can't endure for long. Does she not see the irony that, like, when you have a woman who is naturally, like, assertive and independent and strong-willed, and you're telling her she has to push against what's natural to her and pretend to be all, like, meek and feminine and demure and do you not see that that is doing exactly what you're criticizing here? The women we see in the Secret Service were doing their job as well as they could, but the fact is their best just isn't good enough. It's not that they're not capable, intelligent, or strong women of amazing talent. The reality is that they shouldn't have been there in the first place. This is for the same reason that there are no women in professional football. Not because we're less than men by any means. We are simply biologically different, and this is a fact that will never change, no matter how much our culture wishes otherwise. These differences are as undeniable as they are good. I'm not sure how much more we can take before we're finally able to admit this. So many people like this just seem to think that women aren't capable of being big, strong protectors, and then when one is a big, strong protector and shows us that she's being a big, strong protector, they still complain that it's unnatural. They're like, it could never happen. It's happening. But it shouldn't. Stop it. Craziness. And the absolute irony of this woman here, who was just complaining about how we need to stop caring about other people's experiences so much and stop being empathetic, like, because we're hypersensitive and woke, is now in another post saying, women are naturally just more empathetic. Women are more inclined to care. Like, really? Because have you tried doing that yourself towards other people? Just a thought. Just a thought. Gets me mad. And again, there's just so many useless stereotypes in here. I know I am not naturally nurturing and peace-bringing, except maybe around dogs. Like, I am an independent, strong-willed bundle of anxiety. That is my natural form, okay? I can't change that. I can't push back against it. And I'm not that way because I'm being told by society, by woke society, that, you know what? Have you ever tried being an anxious mess? Because I'm just thinking it would be a good thing for you. I'm not choosing to be this way, okay? It's just the way I am. It's what comes naturally to me. And I'm not going to be happier by forcing myself to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not gentle and demure and, like, I don't know, nurturing and motherly. I'm a little bit chaotic and creative and passionate, and that's just who I am, and it's okay. It's absolutely okay. For someone who talks a lot about how God's design is perfect, and we all just need to accept ourselves the way we are, she seems to want so many of us to change who we are and pretend to be something we're not, to fit what she views a woman should be, instead of just being the women we are. I was also really confused for a moment about her no women in professional football line, because women's football is insane. And over here, our England women's team is way better than the men's team. Just saying, just saying. Argue with me if you want, but you're wrong. But then I realised that she actually meant American football, and it seems odd to pick such an oddly, like, US-centric sport, which is one of the few that women don't really compete in on a professional level, when there's so many other sports out there where women are just absolutely smashing it. So, like, take rugby, for example, right? You know, the faster, more fun, more violent version of American football that is better in every way. Again, argue with me if you want, you're wrong. But women's rugby is incredible to watch. I don't even like sports, but I will happily sit in a pub and watch a rugby match if it's on, especially if it's women's rugby, because they just get properly into it. It's so great. I love it. Back when I was like 17, 18, I used to go see my friend Gabby play rugby all the time. Again, women's rugby team. I think it was like the Yorkshire under 21s or something. I don't know exactly, but it was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. I bet you to this day, Gabby could outsport most men that I know. Like, she was incredible. Absolutely incredible. I just kind of have to ask, like, with women like the granddaughter here, do they say this nonsense because they're trying to convince themselves that they actually want to be in these roles they've been forced into and are trapped in? Or is it because they want everyone else to be as miserable as they are? Or are they actually happy in these roles and they just don't have, like, theory of mind where they can understand that other people think differently to them? Or they don't have basic empathy where they can understand that other people have different feelings and want different things? Like, I don't know. I don't understand it. Very confused. Sorry, I'm clicking a pen here. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Honestly, I do worry about her. Here's another example. This one's wild. She got a new niece. There was a baby born into the family, like a... What is this? A great-grandchild? This is a great-grandchild, right. So a great-grandchild was born. The granddaughter got a niece. She became an aunt. And she used this wonderful, beautiful family bonding moment as an excuse to spout her bigotry. Like, why? There's no need. Stop it. These last few months have been a lot of firsts for me, but only one really worth noting here is that I'm an aunt. My sister just gave birth to a perfect little girl, and I totally adore her. Soon after she was born, we went to go visit, and I held her for the first time. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. As a Gen Z girl, I grew up in an experimental world, rife with new and perilous wickedness that wasn't common when my parents were kids. They raised my siblings and I while everyone was getting phones and losing themselves in online apps. Pornography began to be promoted on devices with religious tenacity, and sometimes it feels as if half my generation was raised by social media and Hollywood. But my sweet niece, it'll be so much worse for her. She will inherit a world of even She will inherit a world even more disastrous than mine. The heavily increasing rate of homosexuality, porn addiction, and mental health problems among the youth is only increasing. I'm going to say the latter one there is probably down to people like you a lot. Just saying. And this is a generation that my niece was born into. She'll be surrounded by peers who hate God, and her parents will have to protect her innocence in a place that is intent on destroying it. I shudder at the thought, and simultaneously feel an increased rush of gratitude and admiration at the courage of parents. Blah blah blah, the church is letting Satan in, as a result our strongholds are falling, the dystopian nightmare of Sodom and Gomorrah will soon become a reality if we don't start standing for truth again. Guys, I don't want my niece to grow up in Sodom and Gomorrah. You're bringing the schmoogie bear in for a second. Hi. It's been a while since you've been in a video, isn't it, baby? I've missed you. I've missed you. Good girl. Oh, good job. I just kind of want to know with the granddaughter, like, can she not just be happy that her family's growing without having to get mad at them damn gays ruining everything? What if your niece is gay? You thought of that? And sadly, it's not just the granddaughter who's posting on Facebook stuff like this. Nathan, one of the sons, is also regularly posting on his own Facebook page. He makes a lot of videos for the No Greater Joy Ministry YouTube channel, or rather like the Door YouTube channel. We'll talk about that in a bit. But occasionally he takes to Facebook to promote things like this anti-choice song here. It's ugh. And you know how I feel about anti-choices and all of that nonsense. Again, if you want to see some of my pro-choice videos and kind of hear a lot of the science behind my thoughts there and that sort of thing, I will link a few videos down in the video description. Absolutely wild. Should we take you out for a wee beat, baby? Yeah? Let's take a little break for 2 minutes. Alright, hey everyone, we're filming part 2 today. I've been struggling to get on camera a lot recently, but we're gonna try and give this a go. I'm sorry if you can hear my dishwasher in the background. I just don't really have another option of when or where to run it. So here we are. Okay, we were about to start looking at the No Greater Joy magazine / blog post / website sort of thing. So these are the articles that they put out every month for people. Most are written by members of the Pearl family, usually Michael or Debbie, often Nathan, sometimes some of the daughters, but occasionally a few posts are... Careful, baby there. Occasionally a few posts are contributed by friends of the family. For example, this one, which was written by Beth Detterman, and it's called Deceptions and Distractions for Wives. She opens by saying, why do so many women divorce in midlife? Is there a source to this madness? Is there something we can point to that would explain the divorce phenomenon that is causing so many families to be ripped apart? Well, I have the answer, but you won't like it. Sister, the problem is you. Which is interesting because actually, according to a lot of studies and research done, it's not entirely down to the woman. Crazy that, isn't it? I just found one particular study that was referenced by a bunch of divorce lawyers, so I kind of feel like they know what they're talking about, which said that lack of commitment is the most common reason given by divorcing couples, according to a recent national survey. Other reasons include arguing too much, infidelity, that's 55% of couples break up or divorce because of infidelity. 55%. That's not all down to the woman, is it? Married too young, unrealistic expectations, lack of equality in the relationship, lack of preparation for marriage, and 25% of people say domestic violence or abuse. Again, that's not down to the woman. I'm going to guess most of those cases, the woman was the victim. Can't go blaming the women for that one, can you? But no, apparently it's always the woman's fault. I guess we're just easier to blame like that. She goes on to say, I know this is a bold claim coming from someone you probably never met, but I can say it's because I have had intimate experience with rock bottom and then climbed my way out. This article is going to be hard to digest for many of you because it's all made up crap. But I'm writing it because the difficulties in my early marriage caused heartbreak that I hope to help you avoid. Which means my husband told me I was crappy, I internalized all that, and now I'm passing it on to you. She's like, blah, 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 this is who I am. I have 10 children and 2 grandchildren. My family is my greatest accomplishment and blessing from the Lord. That many kids, I feel sorry for her. I met my husband and the love of my life, but he didn't mean those things to me back then. At the time, he was just a cute 17-year-old boy with a cool truck, and I was a 15-year-old girl with big ideas. neither one of us was saved. When I was 18 and he was 20, we got married right out of high school. Going into marriage, I had all the wrong ideas plus a bad attitude. My rude, selfish, and disrespectful behaviour nearly cost me my marriage. Praise God for his infinite grace. We sure needed it. Now, after being married for 26 years, I'm a new person. And as much as I'm annoyed at her for like writing articles like this that are like, oh, women, it's all your fault, like, I can't help but feel sorry for her because, like, who told her she was rude, selfish, and disrespectful? Because are we sure she actually was? Or was it just a man being mad that he couldn't control her completely? Just saying, I'm dubious going into this. I think she's an unreliable narrator. I think she's probably harsher on herself than she needs to be. Who's to say, really? But I'm just, it's a feeling I get. She goes on to say, are you actually reading the Bible? There are plenty of evil men who wickedly mistreat their wives, but that doesn't give you full allowance to disregard God's word and blaze your own path to personal fulfillment. No woman has ever been happy or fulfilled by neglecting to obey God in regards to her role as a wife. Really? Because I can name 10 off the top of my head. Stop pointing the finger at your spouse. Stop looking for issues in your husband or the reasons he needs to be better. And at first I was like, am I reading this right? And like, please tell me if I'm misunderstanding in the comments, right? She says, even if your husband is an evil man who wickedly mistreats you, her words, you still need to fulfill your role as a wife. Do you know how dangerous it is to tell women this? It makes me so angry. Grumble, grumble. She says, by the time most wives enter their 30s... Already there, love, not married. By the time most wives enter their 30s, they have oh, this is bad. This makes me really angry. Sorry, I'm restarting many times here. By the time most wives enter their 30s, they have extensively practiced emotional manipulation with their husbands to the point of teetering on mental instability. They've spent many years of their lives irritated and frustrated with their husbands and having daily hurt feelings, then responding in bitterness, disrespecting him in public, making him into a bad guy, instead of practicing being thankful and joyful, giving grace and supporting him through hard times. You need to lift him up when everything inside you is telling you to tear him down, not because he deserves it, or even because you think it'll make your marriage better. Do it because God said so. To say that the main cause of marriage breakdowns are women being emotionally manipulative is just insane, right? I can't believe, like, she's saying, you know, let's say you have spent years of your life irritated and frustrated with your husband and having daily hurt feelings. This sounds like a problem for your husband to solve, not for you to change. Like, if he's hurting your feelings every day, he's the one doing something wrong. You can't say that someone being sad that their feelings are being hurt is them being emotionally manipulative. So dangerous. It bothers me. It really bothers me. This makes me feel like, again, when he called her, what was it, rude, selfish, and disrespectful, it just meant she was sad he kept hurting her feelings. That's what I'm getting from this. Ladies, stop falling for worldly lies. Don't convince yourselves that you are emotionally or mentally abused. This is a trap designed by Satan to make you leave your husband and leave your children vulnerable. Trust me, I grew up in an abusive home. I know firsthand what it looks like because I've lived it. Learning to reverence your husband is crucial, and it should never be based on performance. He is your man and your head. God has given him a huge responsibility in providing for and protecting you and your children. This is God's design. Embrace it. Again, does she hear herself here? I was like, am I reading this right? Because this is horrible, horrifying, awful. I have no words. You're not abused. I was abused, so you just need to get over it. Where does she get off saying crap like that? As someone who was in a physically and emotionally abusive relationship, I can say with all certainty, and I feel the complete opposite of her, if this is happening to you, it is not okay, and it is not your fault, and you must leave as quickly and safely as you can, and there are resources out there that can help you. Do not let anyone, including this Beth woman, try to convince you that what you're experiencing as an abused partner is somehow your fault or deserved or not real. You deserve better, you deserve to be safe, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. This woman is an actual danger to other women, and she sounds miserable. Listen to this. I know that offering forgiveness to your husband isn't easy, especially if he doesn't deserve it, But then again, neither do you. She's not the only one talking about relationships, though. Nathan Pearl, one of the sons, remember, he wants to talk about marriage negotiation. At its core, marriage, or for that matter any relationship, is a series of negotiations. When you peel back the layers of extraneous decisions to be made in your married life, the center of each decision is a core of negotiation with your spouse. It's an odd way of phrasing it, but yeah, makes sense. And yeah, I guess, kind of, you can put it like that. It's a little dry and clinical, but absolutely fine. I can't really argue with it. The thing I want to focus on here, though, is later in this article, blog, whatever you want to call it, when he talks about how men and women are different, because you'll have a good laugh at this. It has been postulated that men tend to see the world in the macro, while women tend to see the world in the micro. Women tend to see the world as a series of shifting relationships, and they focus on each one individually and simultaneously, while we men scratch our heads and try to figure out what on earth they're talking about. Men tend to see the world as a series of opportunities. We look at the big picture, to the detriment of the relationships that are under our noses. I don't know why I'm doing that voice for him, but I just think it fits. He seems like he's this kind of like faux intellectual who wants to use a lot of big words to sound clever when really everything he's saying is a load of horse poop. You know? Men tend to like things like politics, sport, business, and fishing, because these things bring the possibility of opportunity to be exploited. The idea that you might catch the big one inexorably pulls you back to the river with your fishing pole. Women tend to pay attention to birthdays, anniversaries, who likes who wore what outfit, and so forth. All these silly little girl things. Again, this is just meaningless nonsense, right? It's a load of crap. Men like fish, women like clothes. Stop it. Come on. After covering this kind of crap for so many years, I'm just kind of a bit fed up and bored of it now. Like, there's only so many times you can hear this nonsense without just being like, I think my head will explode. I was also confused by what he meant by, like, the possibility of opportunity to be exploited. And I was like, does he mean that, like, the chance to exploit someone else? Or is he just misusing the word exploit because he doesn't know what it means? I'm so confused. But I think I've been reading it wrong. Once I put it in the stupid voice, I kind of heard it. He means, like, brings the possibility of opportunities which can be exploited. Like, you can exploit these opportunities. I think that's what he means. So he's like, there's an opportunity for an opportunity to be exploited. It's an awful way of phrasing it. It's still very stupid. And also, when he's like, men like to exploit things, because that's ultimately what he's saying here, is that not concerning? Is that not a concerning character trait to have? And I am so thankful that he is wrong, and it is not true of all men. For instance, a man may find great satisfaction in a thriving, successful business, because we all know women never get satisfaction out of that, right? Right here. If at any time you were to have a conversation with him about what is most important in life, he would confirm that it is his family and his relationship with his wife. However, from day to day, he will sacrifice his family and relationship with his wife to triumph in his chosen field of business. Intellectually, he understands and will even attest to the fact that what he is doing will not bring him happiness in the long run. But his inability to feel the value of what is near cripples his ability to make wise decisions between the far-reaching goals of winning in business and the immediate need to spend time with his family. Pastors and ministers tend to do this with a sense of holy reverence, knowing that their prescribed activity takes precedence over any familial responsibility that they would otherwise engender. They are wrong. See, if a woman said any of this nonsense, we'd be called selfish. You know, I choose my work and creative projects over family all the time, but apparently it's not natural when I'm choosing it. It's natural when a man does it. I don't know how long I can keep up this voice, but I'm going to keep doing it. If you hate it, skip ahead. The wife wants the husband to stay at home more, spend more time with the children, focus on the shifting quagmire that is the relationships taking place in the community. While acknowledging a need for a stable income, she will repeatedly ask that he not put in the time and effort needed at work to succeed. Sounds to me like you're just neglecting your wife, she's calling you out on it, and you're mad about it. Get over it, mate. Do better. Ultimately, what all this comes down to, though, is him just saying, divorce is never an option. Whatever problems you have, don't do it. Blah, 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 blah. All this nonsense again. Marriage is different. Marriage is not an agreement or a contract. It is a covenant with God as its arbiter. As such, it is not your right to cease negotiating and go your separate ways. If you are unhappy, learn to do a better job negotiating. Now, this doesn't mean that every disagreement can be settled in a way that is satisfactory to both partners. Otherwise, it will be dissatisfactory to both partners. The goal for the godly married couple is not satisfaction, but success. But a successful moral marriage. To accomplish this, you need to view yourself not as an independent agent, but as a fiduciary acting on God's behalf to create a union that honors the office that He has granted you. This voice is getting crazier. I don't know what's going on. Luckily, we're nearly at the end now. A failed marriage is not a failure of both partners. If your spouse is awful, that is your fault. You picked them. It is not, however, your kid's fault. Accept your part of the responsibility and repent to your kids. Repent to God and follow Him. Kind of a little fire and brimstone here, but okay. If you have not failed yet, figure out a way to do better. Negotiate better. Love better. Pray harder. Remember the cost of failure and the beauty of success. There is nothing more fulfilling than being in the middle of a well-ordered, God-loving, kid-raising, hymn-singing, foot-stomping, fun-having family. So fight for yours. They're worth it. Okay, I had a little bit too much fun with that. God's sake. All silliness aside though, we're back to this victim blaming nonsense. If your relationship breaks down, if your partner is horrible to you, if something goes wrong, it is entirely your fault. Probably mostly women. Very victim blamey. I am not a fan at all. Next up we have an article written by Michael and Debbie themselves. It is about women who dare to watch pornography. Wild, terrible, how could they? This has the incredible catchy title, Female Use of Porn. I put the pause in there because of the fonts on the graphic, you know, I'm just placing the emphasis where they want it. Female use of porn. Love it. Don't know why I'm in such a silly mood today, but I'm enjoying it. I'm not going to do a Debbie Pearl voice. She says, historically, we have thought of porn consumption as a solely male vice. The inaccuracy of that is now obvious. The so-called soft science of psychology has provided... Please, you two wouldn't know science if it slapped you on the face, never mind a hard or soft science. Psychology has provided us with a surprising... I'm sorry I'm mean, but just the things they say, I am out of empathy for them. It's gone. It's past gone. They have inadvertently been involved in the death of 7 children. Like, I think I can be a bit snarky towards them. When I've killed 7 children, people can be this snarky to me, you know? Fair game. Psychology has provided us with a surprisingly updated insight into the nature of porn use amongst girls and women. However, there is a very obvious difference between the kinds of porn males and females prefer. Now, this is not the first time that Debbie has touched on the topic of pornography, and I thought it would be fun to do a little flashback here where we read a little extract from Debbie's book, Created to Be His Helpmeet. In this story, though, it's the opposite. This is about men watching porn, and this is a letter not actually written by Debbie. It's written by a woman to Debbie. She's requesting marriage advice because she caught her husband watching the dirty, dirty videos. I know. This is a story titled Throwing Rocks, because of course it is. Now, you may think that's a clever metaphor for something, but it's not. It's meant entirely literally. Dear Pearls, about 6 months ago, I noticed that every evening my husband started going to our spare room to work on his computer. One of our younger daughters often cried when he was around, and so he said he was giving her space and trying to avoid upsetting her. Sorry, is that not a red flag? A daughter always crying around a certain man. Anyway. Besides, he was tired and wanted some peace after working all day. I inwardly wondered, but let it pass. His evenings in the room started earlier and earlier and lasted later as time passed. I would ask what he was doing and he would say it was research for work or that he was trying to build a website. On occasion, I tried to get in the door to see him about something, but it was locked. Okay, it was locked and my husband would call out that it was because the kids would not leave him alone, so he had to keep it locked while he was in there. Sure you did. One day a friend came over and I asked her if she would show me some things on the computer since I knew nothing about it. She was Isn't it funny how this is another example of men utilizing women's ignorance to get away with being crappy? Anyway, sorry. She was surprised because a part of the wiring had been removed so it could not turn on. He's literally dismantling his computer so she can't use it. Dodgy as hell. It was then I finally admitted to myself that my wonderful homeschooling, church-leading husband was into porn. Interesting how that's where her mind jumps and not anything else. At least it wasn't anything more sinister. Well, actually we don't know, do we? Anyway, he's into porn. So she comes up with a plan. A schnecky plan. I fixed the window shades to where there was a tiny crack and moved the computer screen and desk a little so that I could see the screen when I looked in through the shade from the outside. Schnecky. All day my blood boiled hotter and hotter. Interesting how she has to do this instead of just communicating with her husband. You could be like, hey, you been watching porn? Not a thing? Can we talk about it? Set some boundaries? I mean, you guys know, like, I don't have a personal problem with that, but some couples do, and I think it's fine. You just need to set your boundaries as a couple. Like, for me, I draw the boundary at, like, either stuff that you, like stuff that you pay the content creator for. So, like, OnlyFans stuff where you have that kind of parasocial relationship with them. No, not okay with that. Not at all. Following sex workers on social media? No, not okay with that. But, like, little watching it occasionally, kind of being anonymous? Not an issue for me. That's fine. Other couples will have different boundaries, and that's absolutely okay. You set the boundaries yourself, and then as long as you're both respecting them, that's fine. The problem here is that they clearly set a boundary, and he's not respecting it, which is a betrayal. And instead of talking to him about it, she's being a little sneaker, you know? It screams unhealthy relationship all around, doesn't it? Blah, 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 blah. All day my blood boiled hotter and hotter. I was so mad it scared me. My husband went into the computer room right after dinner. I waited until I knew for sure the kids were asleep, and then I went outside to peer into his office. We also talk about how he's just ignoring her and leaving her with all the childcare. Like, what a pig. Like, doesn't he actually want to spend time with his family after he comes in from work? Does he not even like them? What I saw on his screen was shocking. I will never forget it as long as I live. I'm disgusted such a thing. I am disgusted such a thing attracts him. I backed up in confusion and anger and just wanted to throw the wrath of God at him. That's when I remembered the big stones around the flower bed I was standing in. I picked one up about the size of a kitchen plate and threw it through that window just as hard as I could. It busted right through that recently installed Anderson window. My husband was running out to stop the bad guy by the time I got into the house. I passed him, ran straight into the room, carrying a rock with me, and finished the job. Smish, smish, smish on the computer. Of course, when he heard the smashing inside, he figured out he had been caught. I was screaming like a crazy woman and bleeding from a few superficial wounds where glass had flown back at me. The kids woke up and came in crying, so it was the worst possible scene. My husband tried to pretend like I was a hysterical woman. He's just awful all around, isn't he? And that I'd not seen any porn, but I was past his self-righteous nonsense. Good on her. I told him that tomorrow I was going to call everyone we knew, including his mother, and tell them exactly what I saw. Then he started saying it was his first time. That only made me madder. He finally saw his act was up, and he began to break up with fear and shame of being exposed. I do not regret my actions at all. I felt God was at least as mad as me that this man who expected his wife and children to exemplify Christ was hiding himself behind a door looking at filthy pictures. I did not tell on him, but he knows if he ever goes in and shuts a door or shuts himself off from his family again, I will assume he's into his evil trade, and I will talk and talk and talk. I don't consider it blackmail, it's accountability. He's proven he's not trustworthy and that he uses his authority and religious clout as a cover for his sin. Good on her for calling this out, actually. Good on her. So the door will be open and the children and I will have access to him at all times, and he will not have a job where he is free to play on the computer. And he will not go out at night without one of the children with him, and he will come straight home from work and not stop over for an hour or so anywhere to do whatever. I expect him to act like a husband and a father. I will forgive him and love him and honor him, but he will know there are some things that I need from him that will be a surety to me that he is remaining faithful and true. His openness to us will give me peace and cause me to believe in him. Does this give anyone else Sam and Nia vibes, where after all of his repeated cheating, he now can't even take his phone to the bathroom with him? He feels like he can't even brush his teeth at awkward times in case she suspects he's cheating. He can't brush his hair or put gel in his hair or something in the middle of the day in case she thinks he's cheating. It just sounds like no way to live. When you have this little trust, just do yourselves a favor and break up. You'll both be happier, and you won't be with a cheating piece of crap who disrespects you, you know? Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to attempt 3 to film this video. Let's try and finish this today. We got this. I have so much to do. I've written a whole other script in the time it's taken me to try and film this, and I have 50 odd pages of that to film yet as well, so I'm going to be talking so much. So let's see what Michael and Debbie have to say about women and their use of porn today. It is easy to define porn used by men. Men are wired in their brains to be visual. All normal men respond to the bodies of women just walking down the street, on a billboard, in a media ad, or pictures in magazines. Women stripping on stage, videos in movies, and now the visual stimulation of HD pornography and developing augmented reality. Can we just stop with this, please? Where do I even start with how many things are wrong with that? One, all normal men. Are you saying that men who aren't attracted to women aren't normal? Because we need to talk. Are you saying that men who don't experience attraction aren't normal? Because again, we need to talk. And the big thing is, let's say a man does experience sexual attraction towards women. Can we please stop with this absolute nonsense that the mere sight of any woman, even showing a little bit of collarbone or whatever, turns men into these rabid animals? Because that's just not the case. It is so dehumanizing to men. It removes their agency. They are perfectly capable of controlling themselves and knowing when and when isn't an appropriate time to have sexual feelings. Let's not infantilize men, please. Come on. The reason men do not see porn as cheating on their spouses is because it's so impersonal. Well, I think a few might feel like this, and also a few women will feel like this, and that's why they don't see it as cheating either. I just think it's quite impersonal. I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem. Not being linked to their sexual drive for female intimacy. Though in time it will come to take the place of real relationships and even render them impossible. That's a lie. The use of porn does not bring satisfaction. It is just an itch that requires regular scratching and will, in time, leave the flesh insensitive to the real touch of a loving woman. Men, particularly in a healthy, moral, intimate relationship, have limited sexual capability that is fully satisfied for a time, but porn never brings satiation. A man starts out using porn and ends up being used by it. Yeah, a lot of jumbly word nonsense in there, but honestly, absolute nonsense on that last part, right? Sure, some people can get addicted to porn, if you want to call it that, or overuse it, or misuse it, or abuse it. These are absolutely things that can potentially happen, but that doesn't mean that pornography is inherently bad, and that is going to happen. In general, as long as you're not misusing it, for want of a better word, it doesn't make a person insensitive to real touch. That's just a flat-out lie. Also, men in a healthy, moral, intimate relationship have a limited sexual capability. What does that even mean? I mean, from a physical standpoint, men have a refractory period that is far longer than women, which means they have to, it takes longer between orgasm and arousal, but is that what they mean? I think she's just making stuff up, isn't she? Or they are. Sorry, it's both of them. If you want to find out more about refractory periods and all that sort of stuff, I talk about it in a lot more detail in my reviews of Bethany Beal's sex courses. So that's fun. You can go find out lots of interesting sex ed stuff over there. And also see me debunking a lot of misinformation spread by Bethany and her guests. Fun times. The article goes on to say, women are different from men in that they're not as visual. Clearly they've never met me. Many women are given to porn and may not know it. A female's porn is often found on the pages of a book expressed in words and not pictures. For years, before women were exposed to printed or video porn, they indulged their erotic imaginations through romance novels, many of which contained descriptive eroticism. Psychologists and sex therapists, whatever that is, sorry, that's quite funny, reveal that women prefer their erotic words or images linked to their romantic drives. They want them in the context of relationships, and to them it is not porn. Again, there's just so much misinformation in here. Plenty of women are visual. No, I am. And it all comes down to the individuals and what they're into. Some women are more visual, some like erotica, some like both, some like neither, some like something else entirely. Some people can get turned on by smells or, scents and aromas and that sort of thing. For some people, you need physical touch to initiate it. For other people, you can just imagine whatever you want and get there. I know I've never read like a smutty book and been like, oh yeah, that's making me feel some things, because that's just not what works for me. So Debbie being like, this is what all women do, is just an outright lie. Woman here, doesn't happen for me. Claiming that every woman is the same in how we experience arousal and attraction is just an outright lie. Not to mention, there are plenty of women out there, and just people in general, who are asexual, and Debbie seems to completely forget that they exist. Can we not? Women will watch movies that have explicit sex scenes linked to a romantic story and not think of it as porn because it involves deep feelings. Nor are they offended if their husbands view the porn scenes with them. Why is this your problem? But if the scene were removed from the storyline and they caught their husband viewing it, they would be highly offended that he was watching sinful porn. The man doesn't need the storyline or romance to make visceral scenes provocative. The porn is sufficient without context, whereas the woman wants romantic context for her porn, and in her mind that somehow makes it less porn-like. You're just saying words here. None of this means anything. There is no truth in it. This is not a universal truth that fits everyone. Men, I implore you, don't destroy your natural erotic nature with artificial eroticism, disconnected from a pure relationship of caring. Women, don't be Satan's fool in thinking your minds and souls are not being made putrid when you read or watch sexually provocative words and images produced by a class of defiled, broken, loveless human beings working their way to hell while they profit from your lust and pass on the godless carnality of their degenerate ways. When the mothers are defiled, the nation is defiled, and there is no return. Oh my god, I shouldn't laugh, but it's just so dramatic. God's sake. I can't believe she actually has the nerve to talk about real people in this way. Oh my god. Defiled, broken, loveless human beings working their way to hell. Come on. Oh, God's sake. The next post I want to look at isn't quite so serious. It's not quite so wild and out there and calling us all terrible beings, but it is an absolutely ridiculous story passed off as truth when I am like 300% sure this did not happen. I would stake my flat on it. This did not happen. If this happened in real life exactly as it's written here, I will give up my home, okay? This was written by Jennifer L., a friend of the ministry, and, well, it says it is. It kind of reads exactly like the weird self-insert fanfiction that Debbie was writing in her novel. So, who's to say? Not me. I would never. I had the most amazing encounter with a homeless man. Why does this sound like Colleen Hoover and it ends with us, and the first person I had sex with was a homeless man? Like, come on. Start again. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Sidetracked. Can't speak. I had the most amazing encounter with a homeless man where God orchestrated something I could never set up myself. Just this morning, I put a good and evil comic book into both our SVU and our truck, along with some Starbucks gift cards. In fact, I want to start having these books on hand in the vehicle at all times for whenever the Holy Spirit shows me someone who needs one. So, after I picked up my twin boys from school, we saw a homeless man on a busy corner downtown. But since the light was already green, I didn't want to cause a huge traffic jam by stopping at his corner. However, as we passed him, I really felt like we should have given him one of the good and evil books. As we kept driving, I said to my boys, "Should we turn back around?" I couldn't decide at first, but voiced my thoughts aloud. What if there's no tomorrow? What if we're in heaven tomorrow? This man needs to come too. Plus, We have the time, we have the book, we have the man, and we have the assignment from God to evangelize. So, even though we were already halfway back to the house, we decided to turn back around and go deliver the book. This woman has too much time on her hands. Just saying. Just saying. This time, there was only one car in front of us at his corner, and the light was still red. So immediately I motioned to the homeless man to come quick to my car because I knew I'd only have about 30 seconds to talk with him before I'd have to keep driving. Why am I imagining her being like, you know, when people are rude to servers in restaurants and they're like, waiter, come. Imagine it being like that with the homeless man out the window, like, come, homeless man, here. You can picture it, right? Not nice. Let's not do that to people. Although, actually, awkwardly, I don't know if you guys know this, I train Kyra with clicks and like a lot of hand signals and stuff like that, because often if I get a cold or anything like that, my voice goes immediately. I have tonsil issues that keep coming and going, and I will lose my voice for like weeks at a time. It's really bad, really annoying, and I need to be able to communicate with her. So I train her with like clicks and hand signals and stuff like that, and it kind of becomes second nature to the point where I've accidentally done it to people a few times. So like the other day I was like on a walk with someone and I saw these mushrooms, so I went, mushrooms. And like before I realised what I done, I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I just signalled you like you're Kyra. Another time I did it to Kieran one night where like we were up in bed talking, and like this was like a year ago, and we'd been up in bed talking and I was like, alright, time for bed, like thinking I was tired, and I was meaning to say something like, alright, let's go to sleep or whatever. And instead I just went, right, bedtime, lie down. And he was like, excuse me. I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. And now I'm doing it to random people as well. It's really embarrassing. I've got to stop. I spend too much time with her. I'm just so, like, communicating it with her that way is so natural. It started slipping out towards people and I have to stop it. It's very embarrassing. Anyway, where are we? Okay, so she's beckoned the homeless man over. First, I gave him the Starbucks gift card, and then I handed him the Good and Evil book. As he took the book in his hands, he immediately recognised it, and a flash of amazement and huge excitement came onto his face. In fact, he was so excited that he completely ignored the gift card and became focused entirely on the Bible comic book. What he said next blew me away. This woman has clearly been watching too many of those like awful Facebook videos. It's like, this man caught his wife in bed with another man. What happened next will blow you away. And then you have to sit through like 15 minutes of nonsense before he's just like, get out of my house. And then the video ends. So what he said next blew me away. I've been looking for this book everywhere because I once read this in prison in Bradshaw and I've been wanting to get this book again. Out. At this point the light had turned green and I needed to keep going, but my last words to him were, promise me you'll read it. He exclaimed, are you kidding me? I'll start reading it right now. I literally shouted in the car with joy as we drove off because I recognised that God had just orchestrated something beautiful that I could never have set up myself. What are the chances the random person on the street has been desperately searching for exactly the gospel book that I'm about to hand him? The homeless man was so incredibly excited, and I'm sure that getting his long-lost book again reminded him that God had never forgotten him. I can't tell you how happy I was that I turned back around for him. So my Jesus showed himself real, both to that homeless man and to me today. And I shudder to think that I could have so easily missed this divine appointment. This has taught me to be extra sensitive to the Holy Spirit's guidance. I'll be your hands and feet, Jesus. Please orchestrate more amazing encounters. By Jennifer L., Texas. I mean, for one thing, I kind of hate the whole preying on homeless people to convert them when they actually need help thing. Thoroughly hate that. Like, great, you gave him a Starbucks gift card, but did you also have to try and convert him in the process? Like, it kind of feels like you're purposely targeting vulnerable people, and I'm not okay with that. I also dislike the weird infantilization of him and the reliance of stereotypes, because this story absolutely did not happen and it's all entirely fictional. So why did they have to go down the, oh, of course he's been to prison, he's homeless thing? It just, come on, we didn't need it. And also, like I say, just a quick reminder, none of this happened. It just didn't, okay? I refuse to believe it. And let's say, for example, it did happen. Why is Jesus showing himself to you and proving he's real by making you give a book to a homeless man and not helping that homeless man find a home? Have we thought about that? Let's go back to Nathan again, because why not? In this one, he has written a post called A Letter to My Boys. My boys! This is actually an excerpt from the To Train Up a Child 30th anniversary. I told you it was happening and we don't need it. We really do not need it. The world would be better if it wasn't published. Nathan writes, it's been 30 years now since my dad wrote the first edition of this book. At the time I was 15 and my brother was 17. I'm now 45 years old and my two sons are 15 and 17. What a coinky dink. It is unbelievable how fast time has flown by. I remember at 15 when my dad wrote this letter to my brother and me. We were embarrassed that people would read about us one day getting married. We said something like, Dad, we don't need that. We have raised the kids the way I was raised. And so the cycle of abuse continues. As I sit down now and read my father's letters to his sons, it is with different eyes than when I was 15. The world has gotten darker and judgment has gotten closer. My sons must navigate a world besotted with pornography and gender fluidity that was... an odd thing to focus on. That was not part of the common vernacular when I was their age. As we reprint this book after 30 years, I will write a letter to my sons, but it will be printed alongside the one my dad wrote to my brother and me. Because of the trail my dad blazed, the one that I followed, my sons are not starting from scratch. I invite my sons to tread our path, as Paul said in 1 Corinthians 11, blah, blah, blah. Be ye followers of me. Oh, be ye followers of me and Big Papa, even as I also am of Christ. Ugh. Can we please have everyone stop calling Michael Big Papa? It just really turns my stomach. I can't deal. I can't. So 1, pornography was definitely a thing 30 years ago. Not much has changed there. Maybe the technology and how we access it has, but the fact it exists, that's not new. That's been around for several millennia, you know? Didn't they once find, like, cave paintings of, like, people depicting sex and different sexual positions? Am I just making that up? Here you go! Oh, it's from the Daily Mail. Okay, I wouldn't trust the source, but it's just the first thing that I found. But the headline is, Aboriginal erotic rock art proves that even 28,000 years ago, men, I hope that means humans, like in the human sense, had one thing on their minds. What is the source of this? Oh, they've got pictures. They have pictures of it, so I think it is real. Now, of course, it's a Daily Mail. They don't provide their sources. Pfft, come on. Oh, there's a whole Wikipedia article on the history of erotic depictions. Oh, look, there's a picture of sex between a female and male on a clay plaque from Mesopotamia, 2000 BCE. Early cultures often associated the sexual act with supernatural forces, and thus their religion is intertwined with such depictions. They've been created by nearly every civilization, ancient and modern. There you go, see? It's not new. Oh, yeah, the Venus of Wildendorf, how do you say that? A figure with exaggerated sexual characteristics. I've seen that. Where did I see that? Was it Vienna? I don't know, hang on. It is! It's in the National History Museum in Vienna. I saw that. It's gorgeous. It's tiny, but like really, really beautiful. It's great. Anyway, where were we? Also, yeah, his thing about like gender fluidity not being a thing 30 years ago, also completely false. Gender fluidity has always been a thing. Again, probably as long as erotic art has been a thing. A lot of early religions believed, in fact, that like there were essentially 3 genders. There was male, there was female, and then there was a beautiful divine combination of both. In some cultures to this day, but also going thousands of years back, the idea of a human being both male and female, in the sense that like maybe they were intersex, maybe they were non-binary, whatever, like that is in many cultures seen as like the most divine, beautiful thing a person can be. You know, it's again not new. Oh, God's sake. But anyway, Nathan writes a letter to his sons, Jacob and Gideon Pearl. Boys, as I try to put down some sage wisdom that will enrich your life, I must recognize how much you have enriched mine. If I'd not experienced being your father, I would never have known how much life I had missed. You two and your 2 sisters. Oh, but screw the sisters, I guess they don't matter. It's about men being men. You two and your 2 sisters have been have truly been the grace of life that your mum and I have experienced together. There is nothing I am as proud of and that gives me more joy in this life than to see our babies walk in wisdom. You've seen the fun we have, the laughter and the joy of us all working together. I need you to know that Satan wants to take that away from you before you ever get the chance to experience it. Intimacy with this world will deny you intimacy with God and with your future wife. The world you are maturing in hates you. Like, does it though? Or do you all just hate other people and want to oppress them, and people are saying, please don't do that, and you're interpreting that as hate? You need to take responsibility for your own actions and recognize that in spite of the fact that you live in a modern day Sodom and Gomorrah, it is your responsibility to choose virtue, goodness, and life. Satan will constantly offer you easy, attractive, seductive fruit, but understand that partaking of this world's wickedness is rejecting the goodness that God has in store for you. Bit dramatic, mate, I'll be honest. You won't be popular with the worldly crowd. That's okay. Be a man. This is where it gets ridiculous. Don't get pretty hair and fancy jeans. Instead, get hands calloused from helping the people around you. You will be peculiar. However, as you serve the Lord with your whole heart, no matter what your hands are busy working on, God will direct your path. There's nothing more exciting or more terrifying than walking by faith. Alternatively, what he could have said here, if he actually wanted to be a decent person, is, hey kids, do whatever you want with your life, and as your father, I'll always love and support you. He could have chose kindness, and he didn't. Don't be passive, apprehensive, timid men. Grab life by the horns and wrestle it into the dirt. Be a servant, a strong, manly, godly servant of Jesus Christ. They're the only extracts I'm going to read, but there's a lot more to this letter. And there's a lot of this just like, be a real man. Man up, boys. Real men are aggressive and tough and fight and grumble, grumble, grumble. It's nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. And it's not just in Nathan's letter, but it's in several articles across the website, the blog, the magazine. Here's another one written by a woman this time. This is a woman called Brenda, also a friend of the ministry. And she wrote a little article called Raising Men. And then it's a bunch of men, I assume it's like a dad and 4 sons. And they have like hover packs. Is that a hover pack? It feels like a hover pack, like a rucksack with a fan on it, which I assume is for hovering. I don't know, it could be something else entirely. Maybe this is like a high-tech piece of farm equipment, but it looks like a hover pack. So that's what I'm going to pretend it is. Can you imagine just like all these little men, like grown adult men going around with like little hover packs or like on little hoverboards or like just, I don't know, some fun little gadget. And like instead of them being like, oh, this is a fun thing to do and experience, they're all like, this makes us manly men. Ooh, look at us hovering. It's fun. I enjoy it. Brenda Martin says, when we look around us at average young men today, are we seeing strong, capable men? Yeah, quite often, yeah. Brenda says, what we are seeing is the fruit of parenting in the last couple of generations, and it's looking to us like there is death. And it's looking to us like there is a death. Oh, a dearth. Okay, that's less dramatic. Of manly young men. I need to zoom in because I'm not wearing my glasses. There we go. I thought she was being dramatic, but we're fine. But yeah, no, it all depends on what you call manly. To me, I think the manliest of men is one who is kind and emotionally stable and in touch with their feelings and is strong enough to stand up for what's right. That's a manly man in my eyes, but maybe that's just me. She goes on to write, soon after my husband and I were married, we had a vision that when our boys become adults, they would be men. Not weak or silly man boys, but men who had a work ethic. Men who wanted to make things around them better. Men who understood how things work and who could fix things. Men who believed God's word as their guide for truth in this world. Call me crazy, but I think any adult should have a work ethic, want to make the world around them better, and understand how things work and how to fix. Is that not just being an adult? As a woman, I do all those things. Not the believing God bit, I don't do that. We didn't have all the answers, we didn't have a plan, but we knew that what they learned and experienced at a young age would shape what they perceived about who they were and where they were headed. Yeah, that's generally what raising kids is. We desired for them to grow up to be men who were empowered for leading a godly and successful life, not men who would think laziness and self-centeredness was okay. How did that play out in the way we, as parents, guided them? By default, we knew they'd be under mama's care during the day for the most part, but we also knew that the goal was to eventually spend more and more time with daddy to learn manly ways from him. So, starting at a young age, mama gave them little responsibilities in the home. They helped with daily duties, which made them feel needed and important. They were sure the family couldn't function without them. And when daddy had evening and it's so awkward to read. I know it shouldn't be, but it is. When daddy had evening and weekend projects, he would include them in little ways, and thus they learned that teamwork is the norm in our family. You know, actually, I don't hate that. Do not hate that. As they grew up, they would be expected to carry a bigger load in the home and join daddy in the heavier, tougher jobs outside. Mama didn't coddle them when joining daddy might mean enduring a little extra cold or heat. They were learning new skills and gaining much self-worth and confidence by accomplishing big boy jobs. This is where they lose me. Why is working outside a big boy job? Women can do that too. It's not. I'd love to know what they think of me, like when they know that, like, as a single woman alone, like, do all my own DIY and housework, and like, when I want to change the colour of my garden furniture out on the balcony, stripped all the paint off, sanded it down, primed it, repainted it all myself. Like, is that a big boy job? Am I doing a big boy job? When I put furniture together, am I doing a big boy job? For God's sake. We observed that, this is awful too. We observed that if the boys were hanging with mama for the majority of the day, and not in the presence of dad regularly after the ages of 6 to 8, they tended to be softer, to pick up more feminine mannerisms, and were in general more lazy. So you're saying women are just soft and lazy, yeah? Come on. But when they spent as much time with dad as possible, or were even shown by dad how to do a manly project, and were given the responsibility of seeing it through, they carried themselves in a much more mature and manly way. This is all just nonsense. Complete and utter nonsense. Okay. The next post I want to look at is a long one, and I'm only picking out select bits. But this is an extract from another book that Debi has written. And it's a book about neuroplasticity, which is an interesting topic, it absolutely is, but she uses it as an opportunity to spread a lot of misinformation, a lot of bad science that just isn't true, and she spreads a lot of misinformation in particular about vaccines and neurodiversity, in particular autism. And as you know, as an autistic woman, this bothers me a lot. I don't have time to cover absolutely everything that's written in this particular blog post, but I'm going to pick out a few segments. And the blog post itself, like I say, it's an extract from the book. It's called Create a Better Brain. Autism is the most pressing issue. And it's about how autism is bad. It's the most horrific thing in the world. Us autistic people all need curing. Vaccines are to blame, and we're eating the wrong food. And that's what's made us all autistic. If only we had better brains and not these useless broken ones, apparently. It's offensive in just about every way you can think of, and also is just full of misinformation. So she opens by saying autism is the most pressing issue for today's parents. It's predicted by Dr. Stephanie Seneff that by 2025, half of all babies born will be autistic. Now is the time to learn why. Those prepared are usually spared. Now, sorry, but no, autism is not something that you can prevent or cure, and it's not always a bad thing at all. Of course, in some cases, it does make life a lot more difficult, but it's not something that needs curing in us. It's just something we have to learn to deal with and manage. It's the way our brains were made, and it's absolutely fine. A lot of us are affected to varying degrees over a large number of areas, and some of those things might be trickier for some people to manage than others, but ultimately, our brains just working different from the norm or a neurotypical brain isn't inherently a bad thing. It's really not. This Dr. Stephanie Seneff is basically where Debi gets most of her information from, and I googled her, and she is a legit doctor in the sense that she does have a PhD from MIT. However, That PhD is in computer science, and apparently everything else that she says about biology, in particular neuroscience, and she goes on and talks a lot about like vaccines and food safety and toxin, all of that is laughable nonsense. She is not trained in those areas, and she gets a hell of a lot wrong. Other experts do not trust her. People who are experts in those fields go out of their way to say she is wrong and harmful and spreading misinformation. One of her biggest things is she has a big thing about how weed killer is the cause of most of humanity's problems. According to her, weed killer has caused autism, COVID-19, and a whole bunch of other major problems. She just doesn't have the facts to back it up, you know? Here is one article I found about her, which I'll leave the link in the description if you want to read it in full. But it says, glyphosate and COVID-19, Dr. Stephanie Seneff strikes out again. An MIT computer scientist who is obsessed with trying to prove that the herbicide glyphosate, or Roundup, causes multiple human ailments, is now targeting the chemical as a factor in COVID-19. She is firing blanks. I'll just read you the opening 2 paragraphs here, and some people say that I'm harsh or snarky in my videos, but this takes it to another level. But everything he says is is it he? Yeah, Joe Schwartz. Swartz. There we go. Yeah, Joe Schwartz. No, Suarez. God, I literally can't see a thing without my glasses. I need to go from the eye test. Suarez. Yeah, okay. Can't tell if that's a C or an E. It doesn't matter. Joe. God, my body is falling apart. He absolutely rips her apart in this, and he is brutal. But it's rightfully brutal. Everything he says is completely true and based in fact. You can't argue with it. An MIT computer scientist with no expertise in agriculture, chemistry, toxicology, or the biological sciences. And yet, for some reason, Stephanie Seneff has decided that genetically modified foods are the tools of the devil, and that glyphosate, the herbicide used to kill weeds in fields of crops that have been genetically modified to resist it, is responsible for many of society's ailments. She claims that exposure to glyphosate causes autism and attempts to prove this by flashing a graph showing that an increase in the incidence of autism parallels an increase in the sales of glyphosate. Confusing correlation with cause and effect is such a fundamental error that anyone who builds a case in this fashion can immediately be discounted as a reliable scientist. Autism rates have also increased in step with an increase in vegetarian diets, and yet nobody is claiming that vegetables cause autism. Nor are they claiming that ice cream causes boating accidents, and yet both of these increase in the summer months. For years, Seneff has tried to make a global name for herself by becoming the people's champion, a knight clad in shining armour riding a white horse into battle against an agricultural industry that only cares about profits. She's been widely criticised for her abuse of science, but her recent diatribe is truly comedic. She's riding the coattails of COVID-19 in a ludicrous attempt to implicate glyphosate as a factor in the disease. How? By trying to forge an absurd connection between biofuels and COVID-19. The biofuel in question is ethanol, produced by the fermentation of plant products, mostly corn, which is added to gasoline and aviation fuel to reduce reliance on petroleum. Ethanol is not only a renewable resource, but it burns much more cleanly than gasoline, thus reducing air pollution. And blah, 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 she has a problem with that. The rest of the article just kind of rips into her. But I kind of wanted to read this out because it points out a few of her big main issues. She confuses correlation and causation. She is not reliable. She kind of gets these ideas in her head and like tunnel vision follows them no matter what the evidence actually says. It's a lot of problems with her. There's another very short little post on, what was this? I think it's like on science.org. Yeah, by Derek Lowe, who specifically points out about the autism statistic that Debi quoted here, the one about half of children being autistic by 2025. He says, I'm getting a lot of emails about a ridiculous prediction by Stephanie Seneff that half of all children will be autistic by 2025. As far as I can tell, this is more of the same as she was peddling in a 2013 article about glyphosate, and that one was really egregious. You see all these references to researchers at MIT find glyphosate killing everyone and the like, but that paper has no original research in it whatsoever, and although it seems to cite everything possible, it manages to miss the most important invalidating evidence. Just so my feelings about it are clear, from everything I can see, SNF's views on glyphosate seem to me to be tendentious and shoddily backed up and do not deserve 1/10 of the credit that many people seem to be willing to give her. The website that's pushing this autism figure, in case you're wondering, also goes on about the cover-up of the link to the MMR vaccine. This thoroughly discredited and discreditable claim tells me all I need to know about them. Anyone pushing this line has disqualified themselves as far as I'm concerned. I'm not going to link to them. I'm not going to spend more of my vacation time debunking them line by line. That earlier blog post linked to above goes into more detail about just why, but that's the short answer. This is not a new study. These are not respected researchers. This is not an alarming new development. This is a load of crap. Far more is known about glyphosate toxicology and pharmacokinetics than you could ever imagine by reading it. Again, brutal, but deserved. So, now that we know Debi's entire premise and the only scientists she has backing her up are entirely flawed, let's see what else she actually has to say, knowing that it's all nonsense. Debi writes, in a 1990 study tracking 10,000 children, it was found that 3 out of 10,000 manifested clear symptoms of autism. 6 years later, in 1996, the CDC began tracking and found that 34 out of 10,000 children showed clear symptoms of autism. 8 years after that, in 2004, something provoked an alarming increase in the rate of autism. 1 out of every 150 8-year-old children was autistic. Just 10 years later, in 2014, 1 child in 59 tested positive for autism. It's not really like a test, like you do a COVID test. Will half of US kids have autism by 2025? The prediction was made by Dr. Stephanie Seneff, research scientist at research scientist at MIT. Some may scoff at it, but the latest CDC statistics do indicate an alarming rise in prevalence. Most parents with autistic children say raising an autistic child is almost like being in prison. Clearly something new has arisen that is causing this horrific problem, and somehow it must be stopped. Yeah, more kids are being diagnosed with autism because as a society we're more aware of what it is, how to spot it, and we're sending more kids for diagnosis now. It's as simple as that. More awareness means more diagnoses, not more cases of autism. We have the same number of people that are autistic as there's always been, essentially, give or take. It's just we're more aware of it now and we're having more people diagnosed. So, look at these stats. She uses a 1990 study and a 1996 study, right? Let's take a rough average of them and say that, 1993, when I was born, there would have probably been, 20 out of 10,000 kids diagnosed with autism, something like that, if we're going to use her stats. But I didn't get my autism diagnosis until I was, 27, 28, something like that. So in 1993, I would not have been included in those 20 out of 10,000 kids with autism, but I was still autistic then. I just didn't have a diagnosis. So it's not that there were, in 10,000, 9,980 kids without autism. It's just that there were 9,980 kids who may or may not have been autistic because we didn't have diagnoses. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm making sense. I feel like I'm just rambling a bit. And she also points out here, okay, in 1996, 34 out of 10,000 kids, right? 8 years later in 2004, 1 out of every 150 8-year-olds was autistic. So these are going to be the same kids that were born in 96, right? And she's trying to claim that something crazy happened to make it go from 34 out of 10,000 to 1 in 150 in 8 years. She's saying something caused them to become autistic in that time, but that's not how it works. You don't become autistic over time. You either are or you aren't. It's a genetic thing that you're born with. It's how your brain works and is formed and functions. They didn't become autistic in that time. They just finally got the diagnosis in that time. They were autistic all along, Also, let me read you those last 2 sentences again, because I don't know if I put enough emphasis on them. Most parents with autistic children say raising an autistic child is almost like being in prison. Clearly something new has arisen that is causing this horrific problem, and somehow it must be stopped. That is so damn offensive. Like, excuse me? I understand that for a lot of parents, having a neurodivergent child or a child with other needs can be tough, and it can be trickier, and it can be a lot of work. Not going to discount that. But to say that raising any autistic child is sorry, what was the words? Almost like being in a prison and a horrific problem. Like, that's awful. How can you say that about raising a kid you wanted? Oh, God's sake. Personally, I would describe raising any child as being in a prison, but that's because I don't want kids, so if I was forced to have them, it would be a prison to me. But, like, if you choose to have a child, saying that it's like being in prison just because they have different needs just feels so offensive. Like, no, even I wouldn't go that far. Horrible. I actually messaged my mum about this because obviously no one knew I was autistic when I was a kid, but obviously there were signs looking back, a lot of signs, like how I didn't really like talking, unless I was like at home. I wouldn't talk to strangers, wouldn't talk to anyone. Hated it, absolutely hated it. All my little special collections I had of like rocks and stuff, and there were lots of signs, a lot of it there. But I asked my mum, and I'm like, okay, like, even though we didn't know, whatever, blah, blah. Actually, no, I didn't give her the context. I was just like, without telling you the context of how I'm asking this, would you describe raising me as being in a prison? And she was like, who the hell would say that about raising their kids? I was like, thank you, right? And then I told her the context, and let's just say my mum does not like Debi Pearl. Debi goes on to list what she calls causes of autism, which include environmental toxin, vaccines, genetics, and emotional trauma. The only correct one here is genetics, obviously. We're not sure of the exact cause as such, but as the NHS says, nobody knows what causes autism or if it has a cause. It can affect people in the same family, so it may sometimes be passed on to a child by their parents. Autism is not caused by bad parenting, not caused by vaccines such as the MMR vaccine, not linked to diet, and not an infection you can spread to other people. Debi then goes on to share an anti-vax story that she's shared quite a few times before about how the one and only time she got one of her babies vaccinated, she awoke in the night to see an angel of death standing over his bed, and so now she hates vaccines and thinks no one should ever get them, ever. I wish I was joking. It's so bad. Not going to read the whole thing to you because I've covered it in another video before, but it's on screen if you want to have a read. She then complains that Amish children are no longer blessed because now there are some autistic Amish people, and clearly it's because they've started their eating more processed foods or some nonsense like that. Her next argument is that if there is a genetic component to autism, it's because new research has determined that fathers pass on the cause of 80% of autism cases. Wish we had a source for that. Really do. Many scientists in this field think that cell phone radiation could be what is affecting men's sperm. Cell phones were introduced to the general public around 1995 and thus could be responsible for the spike in autism cases since that time, as well as the epidemic levels seen today. Many pediatric neuroscientists are beginning to believe that the failure of the brain to prune is due to the damage done to the man's sperm. I'll say it again. 1. Born in 1993 before phones were a big thing. Still autistic. Plenty of people born before phones were a thing. Still autistic. 2, my dad's never used a mobile phone in his life. He's like 74 nearly, and he's never used a mobile phone in his life. Don't think that's what caused it. Genuinely don't. My autism is definitely not killed. My autism is definitely not caused by cell phones killing sperm or damaging it's so ridiculous. And 3, cell phone radiation is a myth. It will not affect your sperm in that way. Do not worry. As the FDA says, based on the evaluation of the currently available information, the FDA believes that the weight of scientific evidence has not linked exposure to radio frequency energy from cell phone use with any health problems at or below the radio frequency exposure limits set by the FCC. Cell phones emit low levels of radio frequency energy, a type of non-ionizing radiation. The available scientific data on exposure to radio frequency energy has shown no categorical proof of any adverse biological effects other than tissue heating. The public health data show no association between the exposure to radio frequency energy from cell phone use and health problems. Debi goes on to say, though, that numerous peer-reviewed and published research studies show that these man-made pulsed electromagnetic frequencies have adverse biological effects and are very different to the natural electromagnetic fields that have always existed in the environment. Research on humans has found an association between cell phone use and brain cancer, headaches, and damage to the brain and immune system. Yale students found that cellular radiation exposure during pregnancy has led to increased hyperactivity and memory problems in the offspring. Multiple research studies report cell phone radiation penetrates more deeply into children's brains in comparison to adults. A 2018 study found that teens who held cell phones up to their head had decreased memory performance on researchers' tests. So much of this is just untrue. Like, just flat out wrong. The last paper in particular, this 2018 study, I looked this up, and apparently there were several big flaws with that study. One was that it didn't take into account the fact that memory is affected by puberty, and all participants in that study were literally in the middle of going through puberty. So the memory problems they showed could very easily have been caused by puberty, not mobile phone use, you know? Even so, the correlation there was only small. That absolutely does not indicate a causal link. Like, you just cannot draw that conclusion from a very small correlation. You just can't. Another thing is that even in 2018, but even more so today, most kids don't hold their phones up to their heads anymore. I don't know the last time I had a phone call like this. The only time I actually use my phone for calling someone like this is when I have to ring up for a doctor's appointment. And that's like once every few months or less. And like, I don't think anyone talks like this. If you want to talk to your friends, you either video talk with them, or you text them, or you voice note them, which is usually like this, right? Don't know the last time anyone actually held their phone up to their head. Interesting. Meanwhile, more recent studies, including one from 2024, found that most published analyses from this study have shown no increases overall in brain or other central nervous system cancers related to higher amounts of cell phone use. One analysis showed a statistically significant, although small, increase in the risk of glioma among study participants who spent the most time on cell phones. However, for a variety of reasons, the researchers considered this finding inconclusive. And this was more to do with like general cell phone use rather than holding it up to your head or, you know, having it touch your body part or whatever, because most people don't talk like this anymore. Anyway. Okay, let's go back to Debi. Debi says, a word to the wise. Neuroscientists are advising men to keep their cell phones out of their pants pockets. Keep them away from your young children. Better safe than sorry. Turn your Wi-Fi off at night when you're not using it. Being overly cautious could save you a lot of grief. I nearly said she sounds like my mum with the turning the Wi-Fi off at night thing, but even my mum isn't this crazy. Even my mum isn't this silly. My mum is not this stupid. And then there's some really offensive stereotypes about autistic people. Like when Debi says, autistic children don't appear to be capable of empathy. Empathy is made possible by active mirror neurons, which are also needed for a child to be capable of pretend play. An autistic child's greatest handicap is the lack of empathy. Trust me, Debi, out of me and you, only one of us is lacking empathy, and it's not this autistic woman. Admittedly, some autistic people do have trouble with empathy. Some of us, on the other hand, tend to be hyper-empathetic, where we tend to sway a little too far in the opposite direction. Others are plenty empathetic, but have a little bit of trouble expressing that to other people. I kind of fall in between the, like, trouble with expressing a little bit and hyper-empathy, so it's a big emotional mess. It's great, love it. It's like any group of adults. There is a huge variety in our abilities and experiences. Even neurotypical people have differences in empathy where some feel a lot and some feel very little. The point is to state that all autistic people are incapable of empathy is just incorrect and offensive, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Hate that. And just when we thought Debi couldn't get more offensive, I'm just gonna read it to you. Many doctors state, God didn't make AIDS, man made AIDS. One must ask, what else has man made? Do your research. It's all there. There are trails of horror as wide as the trails of good surrounding vaccinations. The back trail to autism seems to be very carefully hidden. After researching, I've come to the conclusion that autism is like AIDS in that its roots were based on the same evil in human nature. Both diseases could have started with a mistake in vaccination that no one in the know was willing to stop, but once it was released, it gained feet of its own. As I studied, I reflected on the last few years and realised that now the entire world has become victims of an experiment with an unknown vaccine. Who knows what else man has made? I don't even know how to start with this, but you don't need me to tell you how ridiculous and harmful and offensive and just incorrect this is, right? She didn't quite veer into too much bigotry here, but that's not to say she doesn't feel it in general. Actually, there's plenty of bigotry in another post we're going to look at. This was written by her husband Michael. This is called Don't You Dare, and this one comes with a big warning to not let children read it because it mentions, there's no kids around, it mentions gay people. Shocking. Warning to parents, read first. Parents, this may be a topic you do not want your child reading. Some Christian parents are growing weary of trying to homeschool all their children. A few have relented and sent their kids to public school. I followed some of them 10 years later when the kids have graduated and have become infidels, some practicing sodomy. Parents have told me, but ours is not a big city school. There are local kids and teachers who share our community values. Well, we live in one of the poorest and least populated counties in Tennessee. There are churches everywhere. I recently spoke with a 17-year-old fellow who'd been homeschooled all his life, but was suddenly forced into the public school system for his 11th grade. He has become emotionally distraught at what he is seeing. He was able to endure the guys coming onto him, describing how they were going to sodomize him, but when one tried to fondle his privates, he inflicted bodily harm on they. He was placed in detention, but that was not a bother. Again, I have a hard time believing this is real. Bullying is of course awful. We can't deny that. If a person is threatening to anally rape you or is trying to grope someone, that is sexual harassment and that is sexual assault and it should be stopped. Of course it must. I think that goes without saying, right? But tell me how this links to kids have graduated and become infidels practicing sodomy. Let's not ignore the subtle thing that the person doing this bullying was apparently non-binary. Trust me, mate. School doesn't turn you gay. Bullying doesn't turn you gay. You just are or aren't, Being non-binary doesn't make you a bully. I can't believe the things I have to say. School doesn't make you non-binary. Again, you just see that are or aren't. So much is bothering me. My young friend had daily endured the conversations of their recent exploits, couples expressing publicly what they'd done the previous day. He sat by in disapproval as they viewed pornography in class while the teacher was out, but then they began their lustful conversation concerning infants and small children. He couldn't take it anymore. Later, when a teacher saw him sitting alone, distraught, and asked him what's wrong, he told her what he was seeing and hearing. She began to beam with pleasure and said, "This is so refreshing to find a student in this school who doesn't approve of that behaviour." There were far more shocking and disgusting things said by the perverted children that I cannot even share in this public forum. Suffice it to say, any parent who sends their child to a public school is a blank, 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 and then some. Again, watching porn in class and being a literal paedophile isn't okay, but I also don't think that's normal for any school. You don't just have... it's been a while since I was in school. Maybe things have changed. But I don't think it's the norm to just be, talking about abusing children and watching porn in class. Don't think that's a normal everyday experience, right? It's a very bizarre, very extreme straw man built against the education system. It's weird, right? I also hate the implication here that if you are of a different religion to Michael and Debi, then that automatically means you must be into raping children. I don't even have words anymore. This is all so bizarre. Okay, on that cheery note, let's move on to the very last portion of this video and take a look at their YouTube channels and what they've been up to over there. I've downloaded a little selection of videos and thought we could just go through some interesting clips together. So they currently have two main YouTube channels, No Greater Joy Ministries, which hasn't been updated in about 9 months, and The Door, which is being updated every 1 to 3 days by either Michael, Debi, or Nathan, or I imagine sometimes there's some other random ones, but it's mostly them. Let's start with a couple of clips that I pulled of Michael because they're funnier. So many of his videos give me kind of old man yells at cloud vibes, and they would be absolutely hilarious if they weren't so damn dangerous. Let's start with his video, Has Satan Won?, in which Michael rants that Satan is winning at the moment in this world, but only because God's letting him win, and if God didn't want to let him win, then he wouldn't be winning, but he's winning because God's letting him, but that's somehow Satan's fault and not God's fault, and something. It won't last for long, don't worry, we're all going to heaven except you sinners.
And I'm going to tell you something. Right now, Satan is winning. Satan is being successful in what he's doing. And God's letting him. The Bible says God will let him until he gets tired of letting him, and then he's going to come back and set up a kingdom that has no end. But Satan's being successful.
He then goes on to say that God has this one idea for the world which is laid out in Genesis, but Satan's plan is to do the opposite of all this, which is why Satan loves terrible things like protecting the environment, vegetarian diets, and being gay.
So the Bible tells us that in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. So what has Satan done? In the 1840s and 50s, he came up with the concept of evolution and said, no, God didn't create the heaven and the earth. And then the Bible tells us that in Genesis that God made man in his likeness and in his image. God made him, spoke him into existence, brought him forth from the dust of the ground. But evolution comes along, tells us, no, God didn't make man in his image. And then we find that the Bible says God made them male and female. And what do we have today? Of all the ridiculous things, Satan wants to take the male and the female and confuse the genders and create multiple genders, when the Bible's clear God just made two genders. And then he told them to have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and every creeping thing. So what are we told today? We're told that Mother Earth is more important than man upon it, and that the population needs to be limited to save Mother Earth. But I'm going to tell you, I take dominance over the earth. I have cattle, I have goats, I have chickens, I have dogs, and I'll go out hunting, and I'll go out fishing. I employ these things for my benefit. And then he told them to be fruitful and multiply. Now that means have lots of babies. So what did we invent? We invented birth control. Why? To limit the population. And today there's a movement to cut down the population because Satan's inspiring those things. And then the Bible says that God created male and female, and he says that a man should leave his father and mother and should cleave unto his wife only. So God made one man and one woman. God didn't make Adam with 2 wives or 3 wives or 4 wives. He made him with one wife. And he made them to cleave together for life. So God created sex, and he created to have children and to have fun. And he created one man and one woman for that purpose. What do we have today? We have the whole world telling us that monogamy and marriage are old-fashioned. And so we have people going out and copulating with multiple partners, opposite sex partners, totally in contradiction to what God created. And homosexuality and lesbianism is running rampant, even in the churches today. So what do we have? We have a devil that hates God, wants to destroy everything God has created, everything God has made, and wants to set up his own kingdom in God's place. Now, he's not winning with me. He's not winning with many of you. But as a whole, the number of faithful believers per capita is much smaller today than it was 25 years ago.
I'll be honest, Satan sounds like he's got his life together if these are his priorities and the things he supports. Remind me again why he's supposed to be the bad guy? Actually, how do we know he's the bad guy other than because God says so? How do we know God isn't the real bad guy here? Look, if I was a all-seeing, all-knowing bad guy, right? All-powerful, all that nonsense, and I had a rival, I would absolutely be going around being like, yep, he's the bad guy, not me. He's the bad guy. You've got this guy out here who's just trying to, like, support people of all genders and sexualities. He's protecting the environment, protecting animals, doing all this good stuff, right? And then you have this other guy who's like, ooh, I'm going to say he's the bad guy. Bit suspicious, isn't it? Anyway, just saying. Michael has another video called Can a Christian Be Devil Possessed? This is one of my favourite videos in which he spouts absolute made up nonsense for 20 minutes and expects people to just believe it and eat it all up, like what he's talking about makes any sense at all. Here he talks about real life devil possession like it's an actual thing.
Reader wrote in, wondering if a Christian can be demon possessed. Joanna. Look at me, Joanna. No. Not under any circumstances, ever, in any way, can a Christian be devil possessed. Never, never, never. Now, I say that as one who's cast out about 40 or 50 devils in my time. And I don't mean this charismatic pretend stuff. I'm talking about people that were speaking in other languages, foaming at the mouth, acting like a cat, prophesying, levitating things. I mean, I'm talking about real devil possession like you read in the Bible.
Also this one. Enjoy this.
I could tell you some funny stories about the devil and some of the things he said, but we've saved that for another time.
No, Michael, please tell me the funny things that the devil has said to you. I am 100% sure they actually happened and are not just made up. Really, I believe you. Please tell me. And then finally we get to this story, which also totally definitely happened, right?
You know, I had a guy one time, member of my church. He was a high school senior, 18 years old, football player, sitting right beside me in a meeting. And the first words of the meeting was a song, and Shad Williams was singing, and the first word was Jesus. And that's common with Shad. And so he begins to sing and got one phrase out. Guy sitting right beside me because he was kind of helping us around with our sound equipment and stuff. And this guy stiffens out like a board, puts his hands over his ears and screams, "Don't say that name." And it's a metal chair, so he slides like this, bump, 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 and lands in the floor flat this way, about 230 pounds. Plunk. Holding his ears saying, "Don't say that name." Well, he's not of God. He didn't want to hear the name of Jesus. The devils didn't, any. So I got him up and to take him to a prayer room in the back, and he starts, he's stumbling, he just can't hardly walk. The devil's possessing his body. And a couple of military guys got up thinking I was escorting a drunk out and they were going to help me. He laid both of them out. He was real agile and alert when those guys came around. So he knocked both of them down, and then we got to the prayer room, and he named the devils spoke to me, and they gave their names, different ones, and the devils told me how they possessed him. He was listening to rock music, particularly the music Black Sabbath, and listening to that, he got devil possessed, and he continued to listen to it. I heard one of my grandkids listening to a song the other day that was equal to it. And so that is one of the ways that the devil comes into people, is through devil's music. And so that guy ended up, the devils came out, went right back in. He didn't want them out. So he went home. And he starts screaming, starts climbing backwards, gets up on the couch, puts his back against the wall and said, "Get that book away from me. Get that book away from me. I don't want that book. Get that book away from me." I recorded, I turned my tape recorder on just before he came in. And I had just spent 2 hours with a couple of helpers the night before, casting the devil out and then coming back in. It was clear he didn't want him out, so I said, "Go on." He left.
He ends this story by saying that this football player grew up to be a state trooper and some sort of Sunday school teacher at the same time, but he's still possessed, so he can't possibly be a real Christian. Again, it would be hilarious if he didn't actually genuinely seem to believe his own delusional nonsense. But then again, what do I know? I am a big listener of the rock musics every day, in fact, so I'm probably possessed myself. Ooh.
About 5 years later, he comes back to my house, and he's grown up then, married, had some kids, and he's got a 45 on his side. Kind of freaked me out. I didn't have anything on my side. And but he was real friendly. He said, I'm state trooper up in Ohio, and got married and got a couple kids, just wanted to come say hello. I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, I teach Sunday school in church. So he was a Baptist Sunday school teacher, devil-possessed, probably still is today, may have high claim. If the devils act up in him and the preacher casts them out, he'll say, see, Christians can be devil-possessed. No, they can't. Only people that belong to the devil can be devil-possessed.
Oh, and another video. This one's a little bit older, but let's not forget his infamous UFOs are in the Bible rant. Love this clip.
All right, here I am, Mike Pearl at the door, and we're going to be talking about a subject, UFOs identified at last. Now, these are not unidentified flying objects. These are flying objects, and I guarantee you there is such a thing. The Air Force believes in them, and they're dedicated to trying to discover what they are. But I know exactly what they are, and they are coming to the earth. And you may have seen one, and you may have seen something that's fake, but there are real UFOs in the Bible. The Bible speaks of flying, palleted, saucer-shaped ships with portholes all around the outside that flies at the speed of light, emits burning coals when it sits on the ground, has lightning emanating from it, electrical discharges. With that burnt spots that are on the ground, there's charred pieces of material left underneath them when they park. And they're piloted by strange, multi-headed, multi-eyed, and multi-winged creatures that are a combination of humanoid and animal and bird features. And the Bible speaks of Star Wars between extraterrestrial creatures that last for weeks. And the Bible describes a time when they will come to the earth and men will have heart attacks at seeing them come. That's all in your Bible. Now, just because you didn't know that doesn't mean it's not there. Yeah. How many times have you read the Bible all the way through? Okay, there you go.
He also has a video in which he tells us that we're all delusional and we're going to hell if we've ever got a tattoo, dyed our hair, had a problem with self-harm, tried alcohol or drugs, got a piercing, or married someone of the same gender. I haven't, but I've been to a fair few gay weddings. So basically everyone except him is screwed. I would show you this video, but it's actually kind of horrible and a little bit triggering because he uses some really vile imagery, which I don't think is a good idea to show online. Like, he shows, like, needles sticking into flesh. He shows actual, like, self-harm scars and open wounds and stuff like that. And it's just not very nice, very triggering. We don't need to see it, so I figured I wouldn't show you the clip, I'd just describe it. It's ridiculous, you know? The final thing I want to cover, though, and this is in a little bit more depth, is a video by Debi. This one is actually a bit more coherent than anything Michael puts out. It's more structured than anything Michael puts out, so I feel like I actually have things to say about this. Sadly, the quality of the things she's saying is no better than anything Michael says. There is actually some really dangerous and harmful stuff she says in this video. It's not funny. This one that we're going to be looking at is called Debi Pearl to the Women, and it's just full of slut-shaming, victim-blaming, advocating for marital rape, and all of that dangerous nonsense. So let's take a look.
I'm Debi Pearl, and today I'll be teaching as an aged woman, teaching the younger women the way it tells me to teach in Titus chapter 2. And no culture or calendar will change the commandments of God. They are as relevant to us today as they were when God wrote them. As children of God, bought by the precious blood of Jesus, we are commanded to walk in the light. And Titus breaks this down in how we are to walk. Blaspheme is the strongest, most dreaded word in the Bible. Blaspheme means great disrespect shown to God or to something holy, to slander God. The word blaspheme is used 33 times in the Bible. That's not many times. And when it is used, it is there to make a point that what is being spoken of should never be overlooked, understated, or revised to suit our personal convictions. The phrase that is used in Titus, it reads like this, that the word of God be not blasphemed. God holds his word above his own name.
So clearly here she's opening by saying that blasphemy is worse than murdering your own child or raping a person, right? Well, actually, yeah, that is what the Bible seems to think. So I'll ask again, are we sure God isn't the bad guy?
I want you to have a clear knowledge of your responsibility before God so that you will never cause his word to be blasphemed, and your life will be a sweet, sweet aroma before the Lord. The Titus 2 passage is different from other passages in that it says, who is to teach, the elder women, who is to be taught, the younger women, what is to be taught, and what consequences will happen if it's not obeyed. Very clear. The biggest difference in this passage is that it teaches that the consequences of guilt does not fall on the guilty. Instead, the consequences falls on God's word. Through a woman's disobedience, the word of God can be blasphemed. The word of God is in jeopardy of being mocked, taken lightly, and spoken of with disrespect. Remember, the word blaspheme means to show great disrespect to God or to something holy. Notice in this passage, it is God's word that God wants to protect. It's not your honor, it's his honor.
So I won't face any consequences for doing these things. I'll just make an old book look bad. Yeah, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm going to blaspheme all over the place. Blaspheme in here, blaspheme in there. Got a little bit of blasphemy today? Yeah. You're not selling this to me, Debbie, I'll be honest.
It might seem judgmental and restrictive to your lifestyle, and it is, especially in this present evil world where everyone, including Christians, are doing what's right in their own eyes. God warns us of this. It is sin. It is sin, and it brings shame. It brings shame on believers in general. It brings shame on the church. It brings shame to God's word. And most women, including me, are guilty of some and maybe all these behaviors. It is sickening to think that in my lifetime I may have blasphemed God's holy word. I just don't ever want that to happen.
Yeah, judgmental and restrictive isn't really my kind of thing. And sickening seems a little extreme here, if I'm being honest.
Here are the 8 important lifestyle behaviors that he set in stone. Sober. Sober means serious, grave, solemn, earnest, not light or frivolous, but concerned for what really matters. On the practical side, it means you shouldn't be concerned about having the good things of life or having one fun event right after the other. Don't waste your life on frivolous activities. Just don't do it. Don't waste your life on it. You are not being sober-minded if you get upset when your husband forgets your birthday or your anniversary or other some non-essential reason that the world has concocted to make money. The opposite of sober is silly, foolish, frivolous, and I would add demanding to have your own way. Now I want you to ask yourself, how is being less than sober-minded going to cause God's word to be blasphemed?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. This is just who I am. It's not a phase, Mum. I am a silly, foolish, frivolous woman and proud of it. Okay. All jokes aside, though, this next bit is a lot more serious.
The second in the list is to love your husband. Now, you need to love your husband the way he likes being loved, not the way you like being loved. Remember that when you're not in the mood, you need to remember this. For men, love means good sex when he wants it. It means quality food from your hands. It means respect and honor. This is how a man feels loved. In counseling, in counseling, it is so common for young women to complain concerning having sex with their husband. They're just too tired, or they're just not in the mood, or they just don't have the hormones, or they're just too busy with their children, just every excuse. They also say they're too busy to cook a good meal, or they're upset with their husband because he didn't like what they cooked last time. It is common for women to say concerning honoring their husband, how can I honor that jerk? Loving your husband is not about feelings. It is not even about you trying to change the way you feel. It is the thing you do because God said do it. A man that is totally satisfied sexually by his wife will not have the struggles to resist temptation than a man who has a wife that is not 100% giving all she has that she might satisfy his needs. Man was not created for the woman, but the woman for the man. You need to be that woman.
This here is just advocating for marital rape. There is no way around that. Saying you owe your husband sex even when you don't feel like it, absolutely not okay. If a man has sex with, or if a person has sex with you when you don't want it, or if you are coerced or forced into it, that is not sex, that is rape. It's not okay, and you cannot be telling women that they just have to suck it up because it's their marital duty. That is so dangerous. I don't care how loved raping a woman will make a man feel, he doesn't get to do that to anyone. This is actually horrifying.
Nasty or foolish talk is not for women of God. Just get that down. You need to use honor, dignity, and self-respect in your day-to-day conversation.
The hypocrisy here, right? Says the woman who is publicly so nasty and rude to other people, especially women. Like, the amount of times I've heard her mocking other women's appearance because she didn't like their hair or their teeth or, I don't know, the clothes they were wearing. Like, she has I think I mentioned this earlier, I can't remember because it's been a few days between filming, but she has a character in her novel who she called a hideous hillbilly woman. Like, and it was based on a woman she actually knew in real life, right? That is so nasty. That is cruel. That is uncalled for. It's mean. Like, maybe you need to take your own advice on this, Debbie, and start being a little bit nicer to people. Just a thought.
Fifth one is chase. Chase means purity. Purity in our dress. Now, Proverbs 31 speaks of an honorable, queenly woman wearing purple and scarlet, which denotes elegance. Elegance. Not sexually suggestive style. Get that down. Remember that. It's elegance. Just today, I saw a note from a mama stating, grown men should not demand the young girls dress modestly. They are grown men and they shouldn't lust after young girls. Whew! That is one foolish mama. Grown men are designed with a natural sexual reaction when they see beautiful female flesh. Us ladies aren't like that, and we have to just believe it's true because it is. They must make an effort to look away, to put it out of their minds, and wish they could have a relaxed conversation without being put in a situation. It's not like they're lusting, they're just distracted. It irritates a good man to be distracted. It bugs him. It makes him angry. He doesn't like the woman that puts him in that situation. A man given to the flesh, oh, his whole thing's different with him. When he sees your young daughter, it will provoke a desire. Any mom who willingly defends her daughter's rights to be half-dressed is not a good mom, especially in this day and age of porn. I mean, we live in such a dangerous time. We all need to be careful about this. Chase in what pictures you post on media. Chase in who you spend time with. Chase in how others perceive your purity. If others perceive you as not very chaste, then you know you've crossed the line.
Yep, and of course we had to have some purity culture modestly slut-shaming, victim-blaming nonsense in here. This just absolutely disgusts me. And this idea that, like, men are just naturally gonna lust after young girls is repulsive. Not every man is a paedophile. You can't claim that is the norm. That is not natural, and they can control themselves, especially around literal children. It is not up to women to have to cover up to protect a man and stop him acting like an animal, and it is especially not up to children to cover up so men, grown adult men, don't victimize them. You do not put the blame or the pressure on the children in those situations. No. Debi is literally disgusting here. And finally, Debi just tells us to be obedient to our husbands, which sounds like a miserable life, to be honest, and is half the reason I will never have a husband.
Obedient to their own husbands. I did not come up with these 8 things. God did. It is God's will that we obey our husband. Obedience is not the easiest thing to do. Years ago, people would say, oh, Debbie Pearl's just a washout. She just does what she's told. I'm telling you, it's hard to be obedient. It's being strong. And yet, after 53 years of being married to a bossy old guy who had some of the craziest ideas known to mankind, I can tell you that it is certainly possible.
I'm not the obedient type, and Debi really does just make it sound miserable, so, I don't know about anyone else, but I don't want a life that's difficult but possible. I want an actual fulfilling life that I enjoy. Like, I don't think that's too much to ask for. And anyway, finally, okay, we are done. We are at the end. They're all the clips I have for today. I know this is a long video. I have been filming, it's taken me like a week to film this. I've been struggling so much. I know it's a long video, but I hope it kind of sums up where Michael and Debi have come from, where they are today, where their family is today, how the content they're still putting out is still so dangerous and offensive, and honestly just mean. And it's so sad that this is being carried on by their children and grandchildren, and seems like it's just going to carry on even further. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see, but that's exactly why I think we have to keep calling out this nonsense and correcting it when we see it, and trying to actually educate people so we can hopefully stop these cycles. I don't know if it's going to help. I don't know if I don't believe I can personally help this family, but I hope that through this work I can help someone, and they can go on to help someone else and someone else and so on. It's hard. So if you have found this video helpful or you've enjoyed it, thank you so much. It means a lot. It would be great if you want to subscribe. If you're new here, leave a comment, leave a like, share the video around. That really, really does help me so much, and hopefully helps other people too. If you find that this kind of content has helped you, then please go pay it forward. Help other people, support other people, try and do it in kindness. But I also know that it's so hard, and there's so much frustration when you're reading and being exposed to this kind of harmful nonsense. It's like there's only so much patience you can have with people. So do the best you can. I believe in you. And thank you all for your time and for watching today. I appreciate you a lot, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.